I now call to order the March 14th, 2019 Pi Day regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Historic District Commission to order. All right, and then I'm supposed to do you want to do a roll call?
Sure.
Yeah.
Commissioner Beeson.
Here.
Commissioner Cope.
Here.
Commissioner Epperson.
Here.
Commissioner Hall.
Here.
Commissioner Quijano. Here. Commissioner Rockland.
Here.
Commissioner White. You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. And then we'll read this part. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Ann Arbor Historic District Commission. I'd like to take a moment to explain the order of the meeting, specifically as it relates to the hearing on the applications on tonight's agenda. Each case will be called, and we'll first hear the staff presentation and recommendations. Following this, the commissioners who serve on the review committee will present their observations and recommendations. At this point, the applicant will have an opportunity to step forward and provide any comments or additional information about the application. Once the applicant is finished, members of the public who wish to provide comments in the current case may do so, while please noting the time limit of 3 minutes per person. Everyone who steps forward will need to state their name aloud for the record and sign in at the sheet located at the podium and limit their comments to the application at hand. Following any public comment, the applicant may be called back to the podium to rebut any public comments and answer questions that the commission may have. Once all questions have been answered, the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate the application, make a motion, have a discussion, and then vote. If any members of the public would like to speak to general preservation topics and not to any specific application, opportunity is provided during the audience participation public commentary following the approval of the agenda. Everyone who would like to address the commission may do so and will be asked to state their name aloud for the record and sign in at the front podium. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Your comments are valuable to the commission. I will now introduce the commissioners. To my right is Commissioner Cope and Commissioner Epperson. To my left is staff, Jill Thatcher, and we have Commissioner Jessica Quijano. Don't tell me. Evan Hall, Commissioner Hall, and David Rockland. Got it. Great job. What's next? Approval of the agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, changes to the agenda?
No.
All right. And do we have something at the end? Yes, we have a working session.
Yes, we do.
All right. Hearing no objection, the agenda is approved as presented. All right, now we're into the audience participation, public commentary. Are there any members of the public who would like to come forward and speak for the record?
Toby, would you like to talk about the Zeta bricks right now?
Sure.
That'd be great.
Hello, I'm Toby Headinghouse. I'm the architect for the addition and the upcoming agenda item for the Zeta House. While I was in town today, I'm from St. Louis. I was in town for this meeting, but while I was here, I was able to meet with a brick rep, and we selected a couple of options for the addition to the back of the house. The idea being it's a blend of brick. Well, it's a blend on the first level, and then there's a whole different blend on the top level. So there's a variety of colors in the brick on the house. But I think the approach we're going to take is one solid color for the addition so that it complements the house but doesn't try to appear to be an addition, replicate the house. So I've got two options. These are both colors that are in the blend of the face of the building. There's a dark and a medium color. They're obviously not exact, but they're very, very close. Personally, I'm leaning towards the darker. When I look at I've got photos, but when you step back from the building, that screen wall that's currently there, it looks like it was added at some point, and it's much darker than the building also. So I think when the building is done, it won't appear much different than it currently does now when that wall comes down. So.
Okay.
So, more for your information.
Good.
Thank you.
All right. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, we'll move on to unfinished business, which we have none, and then on to the hearings F1. So, Ms. Thatcher, would you please give your staff report, 300 Detroit. Oh, the first application of 300 Detroit. There's two applications.
So the first application is for a, after-the-fact HCC approval sought for a vapor mitigation system on the front of this building. So this is the edge of the Old Fourth Ward Historic District. It is the Detroit Street Filling Station right now. The building was constructed in 1925 or earlier as the Stabler Oil Company filling station. By 1951, it was home to Radio Cab, which I think there's a cool picture of at the end of the staff report. And at one point, it was converted to Arbor Fish Market, and the front drive-through area was enclosed with white stucco. The building became Argiro's Italian Restaurant in 1977, and and an addition on this side of the building was put on for Argiro's probably in around 1977. And an addition in 1992 was approved by the HDC on the Catherine Street side. This one over here with the sort of faux garage doors on it. It's at the northeast corner of Catherine and Detroit. And the applicant is seeking, there's another view of the Catherine Street side. Applicant's seeking approval for this vapor mitigation system, which was put on without any permits from the HDC or from the building department. So there's information in the staff report about city code when work's done without a permit. If the HDC doesn't approve it, they can be ordered to remove it, reverse it. Let's see, it's a little different from a radon mitigation unit. The pump is up here at the top. So this is a curtain wall. It's just it's a roll-up wall. That's the outdoor patio. And this black thing behind the white PVC is a black metal support holding up the roof of the patio canopy. And the contractor was out and explaining why they need to put this here, and it all kind of made perfect sense. There's some information in the packet. My problem with it, the reason that I could not staff approve it was because A, it was on the front of the building, and B, it's not inconspicuous right now. And so I had to bump it up to the HDC. From the Secretary of the Interior standards, the ones that best apply are 2, 9, and 10. Number 2 says the historic character of a property will be retained and preserved. The removal of distinctive materials or alteration of feature spaces and spatial relationships that characterize a property will be avoided. Number 9 says new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. Number 10 says new additions and adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property will be unimpaired. From the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines, for mechanical systems, they recommend installing a completely new mechanical system if required for the new use so that it causes the least alteration possible to the building's floor plan, exterior alterations, and the least damage to the historic building material. Not recommended under the guidelines for building site are introducing new construction onto the building, which is visually incompatible in terms of size, scale, design, materials, color, and texture, or which destroys historic relationships. And from the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for Mechanical Equipment, it's appropriate to install mechanical equipment and wiring in locations on the roof, rear elevations, or in alleys. They are not visible from the street. Also installing vertical runs of ducts, pipes, and cables in the interior of the building, closets, service rooms, or wall cavities. They are not visible on the exterior. It's also appropriate to paint mechanical equipment to blend with the historic building. So it's problematic in a couple different ways. First is whatever they're mitigating is underneath the patio slab. It's not under the building. So this mitigation system has to suck air out from underneath the patio slab specifically. So if they were to move all of this inside the building, they'd have to go through the foundation, which at the very least would be inconvenient and would also be probably prohibitive. And then they'd have to run it up and go through the roof somehow. If you, we talked at the site visit about whether this unit up on top could be moved over to the other side of the parapet or shielded, and there's specific installation instructions that have to be followed in order for it to be the most effective, and yada yada. And the commissioners who were on the review committee, after the discussion, we're talking briefly about painting it, which is one of the HDC's guidelines for mechanical equipment to help hide it. And there is a handout that I received a couple days ago after the site visit. It's marked F1 at the top. It's on your packet. It's got a diagram of how it will be painted on the back. It didn't work perfectly, but so it would basically be painted to match whatever it's next to on the building, black or the red, like that banner on the top. One thing to keep in mind about this building is that none of this wall that you can see here is original. There's nothing historic about any of this part of the building. This is the historic part up here, and that's the Spanish tile roof. There's not much left of the original gas station. And in fact, at a later date, when we revisit the Old Fourth Ward Historic District, I will be asking you to take a look at whether or not this is actually still a contributing building, because the historic building is completely buried in there. Nevertheless, the guidelines would still apply even to a non-contributing building, because you're not supposed to put mechanical equipment in the front of the building. So I think I'm going to, let's see. Let me go through the staff findings and see if I missed something here. They found the chemical contaminants during a baseline environmental assessment and phase 2 environmental assessment. Again, staff doesn't take issue with the fact that mitigation is necessary. I gave a little pitch in here for rerouting it some other way to make it less conspicuous. And you've had a chance to read the rest of the staff comments in here. I recommended disapproval of just leaving it the way it is. I think it's moderately more palatable if it's painted so it at least blends in. I think that would be a non-starter if this were a contributing building, but it's really not a contributing structure in my mind, or it's not touching the part of the structure that is historic materials. So the review committee will let you know more about what they talked about at the site visit. Thank you.
All right, Commissioners Cope and Rockland, we're on the review committee. Please give us your report.
Okay. Well, basically, I'm agreeing with the staff report. I would add that we also discussed an option to, go through the, I guess it's a vinyl roof, and that, of course, would void the warranty on the roof and maybe even render it like unusable if like the tension of the roof was slackened by poking a hole in it. We really brainstormed quite a bit on site with what if we do this, what if we do that, and it seemed like it was a dead end at every turn. If we don't approve this, I don't know what, they'll have to shut their business down or something. I don't really get what the alternative is to if we say you can't do this. It really seemed like they need this for the safety of their workers and customers. And I certainly didn't have the expertise or knowledge to say otherwise, so we were just sort of trying to brainstorm, how can we make it better? And really the only, maybe there's two ideas on the table, one in writing here, and is to paint it the colors of the background. Maybe the other idea that was sort of floated that's like almost identical to that is just paint the whole thing black. So those were kind of the two ideas that of all the ideas we came up with that you could actually do and still move ahead with this. So I think yeah, that's probably enough. I might have more comments later.
Yeah, I generally have the same view as you, David. In their follow-up, they said they were going to paint the red facade black as well. So the entire piping would all be one color with a black facade. I think that would really, hide it as much as it's going to be hidden. But there's just no way it won't be visible all the time, no matter what they do. And you are correct, and they don't have really many other options with this to get that system in there. And it being two fronts, on Detroit and Catherine Street, they don't have a back of the building there with access to that patio area. So.
All right. Would the applicant please come forward, state your name for the record, and sign in? And if you have anything to add to the staff report or the review committee reports, anybody? No? Okay, you don't have to. We might have questions for you, though. You might have to come up anyway.
The business owner is here, but the mitigation
Contractor.
guy is not here. He was,
So I can't officially, like, sign off on anything? I've been in the discussions, I could, you know.
Do you have anything to add to what's already been presented?
Well,
come on up.
And come on up.
okay.
We have no app.
Oh,
Basically, it would be really great if it could just get painted to blend in. I was there when they were doing the investigating and trying to figure out where it could go, and there was lots of testing happening in the patio area, and they figured out it had a narrow range of places it could go, and they tried to also help us put it in the least obtrusive place to not taking away table space or not having people trip over it inside the patio. It can't really go up through the roof of the awning. It's like a $20,000 structure that we just put in last year. And if we were to put a hole in it, it would kind of wreck the whole thing, and it would destroy the integrity of the structure, and it would be leaky, and it's like something that is very important to our business. I also know they talked about the placement of the fan is done in such a way that the pipe, like, they can't bend the pipe so many ways because then you'd get like blockages, and I don't remember the twisty, curvy nature of it
Increased
would make
drag.
it not work right. So I also know, yeah, so like I'm officially not speaking on behalf of the project, I'm just sharing some information that I know.
That's fine. Can you still state your name for the record and
Sure.
write your name on the sign-in sheet?
Yeah, Phyllis Engelbert.
All right, any commissioners have any questions?
Yeah, I just had one, just for clarification, that the vapor mitigation system is there because there is a covered patio seating. Is that correct?
I think it had to happen
Or is it-
regardless.
So even with just the patio, even if there
yeah,
isn't?
even if it were an open
Okay.
patio, yeah.
I
Okay,
think it's like for the entire building,
Okay.
actually.
Because it's on a gas station?
Because it, what, because it used to
Because
be.
it was on a gas station?
Exactly, yes. That's what I understand.
So you guys also explored, well, I imagine, like the whole other side of the building?
That I can't speak to,
Okay.
but I know that when they were there, they spent a whole day and they were doing things and testing all different parts of the patio, and they're like, it has to be here.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
I'm just curious, the sequencing of the planning for and construction of the patio enclosure compared to when the study was done and it was made known that this mitigation system was needed.
So, the business before us, our Giro's had a patio. We just replaced the structure.
It was,
was-
I couldn't
It
remember.
was covered.
It was
We
covered.
kind of did a one-for-one. We just got a new one. And after ours went up, then that's when word came that there was an issue with soil vapors.
Okay.
And that's when you guys performed the baseline environmental assessment?
That's when the landlords did. I learned about it after the fact when
Yeah.
they were like, we're gonna put it here. That's when I learned about it.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right, any other questions out there? All right,
don't
move
know.
on to the public hearing. Are there members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? Not seeing anybody really. So you can, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of the application, and you can be seated. Thank you.
Okay. Just trying to figure out what the project name is, but I'll put
Yeah.
it mitigation pipe. How's that?
That sounds good.
Perfect.
Cool.
Would any commissioner like to make a motion on the application?
I'll make motion.
All right, Commissioner Cope.
In the motion, can I include painting of the facade and
Yep.
piping?
Just say it slowly so I can write it down.
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 300 Detroit Street, a contributing structure in the Old West Side Historic District, to install a vapor mitigation unit on the front of the building as built, including painting the entire system black and the red facade black to help camouflage the system. The work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, materials, and relationship to the building and the surrounding area, and meets the City of Ann Arbor Historic District guidelines for mechanical equipment. and the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for mechanical systems.
Seconded by Commissioner Rockland. All right, I think you already noticed that it's not the Old West Side,
It's the old Fourth Ward.
Old Fourth Ward, got that?
Sorry.
Yep.
All right, and is there any discussion on the motion? Yeah, this clearly doesn't meet the guidelines, but now it's like, what do we do, right?
Well, the mechanical system guideline says like least, like it has a word in there, like put it in like the least possible method of obtrusiveness or whatever. So
You're
that's a
finding-
hard one to, like maybe, yes, you could spend several thousand more dollars and make this less obtrusive, but it just seems like there's a practicality to also balance that out. I think it's unfortunate that it was done in advance and sort of makes, you know, takes a practical discussion off the table in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be better had it not, but we get to see it this way and know that it would not meet the standards, so we can be sure about that. I do think that painting it as is on the building might be difficult, and I would recommend, you know, taking the stack down, painting it while it's off the building, and then reinstalling it, but the contractor's not here, neither is the landlord, so I don't know. I guess we'll see how it's painted and,
Yeah.
Joe could pass it along.
Yep.
oh, Jill passed
Yep.
along,
Yeah.
thanks,
Yeah, it's
Jill.
not hooked up yet. It's not running, so it shouldn't be that difficult to take it apart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I saw when looking at the building, like I said, with that corner, there really is no backside or inconspicuous area to the building to run that piping through.
Right.
Every section of the building is visible from a major road and major sidewalk.
Yeah, I wanted to point commissioners to look at the photos that we have in our packet that shows the original gas station and then the roof plan of the original gas station as it stands now. And then you can look at the photos and see that the gas, it's not really there anymore.
It got swallowed.
Yeah, it got swallowed up. So, you know, a large part of our charge here is to try and protect the historic structure, and what we're looking at is not that. So this is a weird one. Do you have,
You have a comment here? Okay.
Where would we go in the event of a tornado? We're under a tornado warning, like,
that's what that beep was.
yeah, just in case you guys.
Yeah, we have to move to the basement. We can continue the meeting there, but you either have to, like, leave and be on your own or go to the basement. We can't stay here, unfortunately. Do you guys want to vote on this one
Yeah.
before we
Yes.
move?
I don't feel comfortable.
No, until 8 o'clock, it says, not at 8 o'clock. Yeah, let's vote.
Okay, you want to vote on this one? Then we'll, okay.
All right. Any other discussion? I don't think there's any other discussion. So we have it in there that it's, in the motion, it's going to be painted black, all the way up, So-
Including the facade.
including the facade and the unit itself. All right, so all those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no. All right, the motion carries. Your application has been approved, and you will receive written notification from staff, particularly about how to paint it and when. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning your project. All right, on the move.
Okay, we're going to go down to the basement.
How does it get
and,
recorded, does it?
It won't be recorded, but we can continue the meeting.
Let's do it.
Do
be
you guys
recorded
know
on a
how to
phone.
get there?
Yeah.
Stairs?
Recap, I'm going to bring us back here.
Hold on.
We've got roll call. Everyone's here that was here before. I have to do a quick recap of what we did downstairs. We did record a little bit of it on a phone, but we did cover F2, F3, and F4. We are now moving on to F5, 120 West Liberty. Ms. Thatcher will give the staff report.
As soon as she finds it.
You want mine?
I might have to.
Let's take it out.
All right. 120 West Liberty is part of the Adam and Anton Shaberly block, built soon after the Civil War. The oldest buildings from 1866 are the ones on the east end. 120 and 122 were built in 1868 and 1870. We're talking about 120 here. It's the current home of the West End Grill. The city directory listings indicate that these were both the homes and businesses of the city's solid middle class: boots and shoes, harnesses, flour and feed, and saloons. Adam Shaberly himself is listed as the first occupant of this building for his residence and his harness business. Each of the 6 buildings in this Italianate commercial block is 3 stories tall, made of red brick. The windows are all double hung, except at 122, with the typical round arches on the top and segmented arches on the second floor. 120 was the first real downtown rehabilitation project when Ned Duke opened Mr. Flood's party in 1969. During the Mr. Flood's era, the storefront windows that you see in this picture were shortened and the rounded first floor cornice added, but the proportions and original iron columns remain intact. Jerry Policki bought the building, bought Mr. Flood shortly before 1990 and reopened it as Polly's Tavern, and it's been home to the West End Grill since 1995, and the Polickis still own the building. There have been no applications for work on the exterior of this building since 1990. It's on the west side of Liberty between South Ashley and South Main, and the applicant is seeking HDC approval to install a new double-sided 36.5 by 17.4 inch projecting sign with spotlighting on the brick column to the right of the storefront. All right, this is the area where they would like to install a sign. One of the commissioners asked me at the review committee to take a photo. You can see that there have been lots of things mounted in this wall, some of them drilled through the brick inappropriately, and some of them in the mortar joints in places where they could be repaired. This is a good example of why we have people mount things through mortar joints instead of through the masonry units. Some strange things going on. 2x4s embedded in the brick. Looking to the east, Grange is next door. You can see that they have a small pedestrian scale sign. Pacific Rim has one as well. The Alley Bar has one also. This Pacific Rim sign, formerly of the Round Table, is a grandfathered per se sign that does not meet sign code or the HDC's design guidelines currently. So here's the proposed sign. It is. It's a very nice little sign. It's a faux bracket. You see that it's really attached by 2 arms through the mortar joints, but it looks like a bracket, and that's to sort of disguise the spotlights, which I think is a very clever way to do that, because the bracket's a very traditional look. It's at the same height and in the same location as the rest of the pedestrian scale signs on that block. And from the Secretary of the Interior standards, number 1 says a property will be used as it was historically or be given a new use that requires minimal change to its distinctive materials, features, spaces, and spatial relationships. I've already read to you 2, 9, and 10. And from the design guidelines for storefronts, designed for missing features, not recommended is introducing a new design that's incompatible in size, scale, material, and color, or using inappropriately scaled signs and logos, or other types of signs that obscure, damage, or destroy remaining character-defining features of the historic building. It also says using new illuminated signs, which our Historic District Commission typically interprets as internally illuminated signs. External illumination is usually okay. From the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for Signs, it's appropriate to install signage in the historic sign band area of the building, where right now this has a West End Grill in fairly small letters. And it's also appropriate to attach signage through masonry joints, not masonry units, or through materials that can be easily repaired. Also from the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for Signs, it's appropriate to install signage that's compatible in size, style, materials, and appearance to the historic resource and district, installing signage that's lit from external light fixtures, placing signs to align with others along the commercial block face, and installing signage that is subordinate to the overall building composition. I do think that this sign meets all of these design guidelines, both the federal ones and the local ones. Staff believes the sign's appropriate and meets the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines, Secretary of Interior's Standards for Rehabilitation, and Secretary of the Interior's Guidelines. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioners Cope and Rockland, we're on the review committee. Please give us your report.
I have nothing to add to the staff report.
Okay.
I have nothing to add as well. I'll just reiterate the, that one photo that was showing the other pedestrian scaled signs down the street. You know, I think it was just really makes this really easy, actually, because you can see we have something to compare it to, and it's a pattern of other signs right down the street. And so that was, just wanted to point that out.
All right, the applicant, please come forward, state your name for the record, and sign in. If you have anything to add to the staff report or
My
review
name
committee.
is Kevin Short with Huron Sign Company. I'm representing the restaurant owner, and I think it's well explained what we're doing. And
All right, moving on to the public, well, first, commissioners, any questions? All right, moving on to the public hearing. Are there members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? Nope. I will now close the public hearing portion of the application, and the applicant, please be seated. Thank you. Would any commissioners like to make a motion on this application?
I will make a motion.
Commissioner Cope?
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 120 West Liberty Street, a contributing property in the Main Street Historic District, to install a new 36.5 by 17.4 business sign as proposed. The work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship to the rest of the building and the surrounding area, and meets the Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines for signs and the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, in particular standards 1, 2, 9, and 10, and the guidelines for storefronts.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Keanu. Is there discussion on the motion? Seems to me like this fits our guidelines and standards pretty well. Commissioner Rockland.
I agree with you. And I just have something to add that's sort of a general comment about the guideline that says to attach the sign through mortar joints. I noticed a sign that the sign itself was attached through mortar joints, but then there was a electrical conduit with a junction box right next to the sign, providing power to the sign as a lit sign. So clearly the conduit's not going through a mortar joint, or if it is, it's destroying, you know, the brick
Right,
along with
Facebook.
it. So it's a bit of a side issue, but pertaining to, you know, this and every other sign is that
If there's
standard
lighting.
not
Yeah.
clear enough that, you know, this sign and any other of its, you know, components, exactly, that do, I'm just bringing it up now, and maybe we can talk about it later, but clearly there was an example of it on a historic building, so,
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about it when we talk about signs later in the meeting.
yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
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 All those opposed, please say no. The motion does carry. Your application has been approved, and you will receive written notification from staff. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the building, from the city, before beginning your project. Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, Kevin.
All right. On to F6, 212 South State Street. Ms. Thatcher. Getting their stuff.
Let's see.
This is all one.
So 212 South State Street, it's the Goldman Brothers building in the front where Sava's is located currently, right here. This is a two-story brick and stone commercial vernacular building. has 1/1 double hung windows with decorative turned wood columns, a cornice with dentils, and a GBB medallion on the front. This building was first occupied in 1928. In 2015, a building behind this building collapsed and was demolished. That building was older and first appears on the 1916 Sanborn as a one-story dry cleaning and ironing building with hollow tile walls stuccoed. It was in the backyard of the lots facing East Liberty at 607 and 611. And by 1925, this separate building also had a section on the south side with 16-foot tall walls and was connected to the new Goldman building that you see here. The Michigan Theater also appears on the 1925 Sanborn for the first time. As an example of what I'm talking about here, if you go to the staff report, page 6, there's a 1947 and a 2009 and a 2018 aerial photo. In 1947, you can see the new Goldman building, and then this little cluster of a little warren of small rooms all hooked together behind it. Those used to be standalone, and when they built the building, they attached it up. And then in the 2009 aerial photo, you can see a color view of the different roofs all over the place, and the taller section facing closest to Liberty. And then on the next page is a 2018, where after it's fallen down, it's largely been demolished, and it's just being used for parking right now. So this is the view from South State Street. Here is the sub is using this for outdoor seating during the summer right now. And this is Elaine Hall, which is owned by the university next door to it, and was built as the YMCA originally. This is the view from East Liberty Street. To the left is the Michigan Theater building. Right now, this is some sort of a rental building for one of the high-rises near downtown. And to the right is the building that is home to Salads Up. And this is a narrow alley. It seems, I'm not even sure. It's not a public alley. Part of it's on Salads Up property. There may be pedestrian easements. The architect may know more about that and can talk about that in a minute. Here are some photos. This is looking toward Liberty. This is the old Borders building across the street. This is that 16-foot front wall. That's all that's left of the stuff that fell down in 2015, had a fire, was demolished, all of that. There's some bracing here, and this is the back of the building that Savas occupies, and if you went this way, you would be walking out to South State Street. This is the little end unit on the Michigan Theater building, and this is a little roof deck on the back of their building. So this is looking towards South State Street. This is shoot, I've lost the name of the fine arts building, house that later became an art dealer. Back here's the parking structure. This is sort of a fascinating view to me because I've never seen the two of them from that sort of an angle before, and soon I probably never will again. But this fence is just a temporary thing that was put up there probably by Savas or who knows to keep through traffic from traipsing through here. This is the former structural clay tile wall, part of the what I refer to as the 16-foot section. And it's up against the Goldberg building, the Goldman building, which is this different structural wall. So this bit is left, but it would probably be just removed to expose the back of this building. But they were built just butted up to each other like that. The structural clay tile is older. Here's part of that wall. Here's the structural clay tile edge that I was just showing you a minute ago. This is some strange bracing. They had to do some stuff with the ductwork when all of this fell down, and I would imagine that it was probably a big mess for a while. The dumpsters and things are right now pushed out, and trucks do come down to service that. We'll get into that in a minute. This is the 2018 aerial. This is a truck parked in the alley. It shows you how tight it is. But they do come back here to pick up from these dumpsters. So the site that we're talking about is this sort of L shape, and a new building is proposed to go right here. Actually, not all the way to the property line on this side, but I'll show you that footprint in a second. That's the parcel. This is the existing building that Savas is in. So this walkway stays here, and there will be a walkway that goes alongside the backs of Savas and Elaine Hall. And the new building will be partly above it, and this is the first floor footprint. The Michigan Theater is getting new restrooms out of this building because of things that are happening behind their building with a related project. And there's a trash room here that will hopefully eliminate the need for any of those zillions of dumpsters that are parked all over the place. It is for specific units that the petitioner, the architect, can talk about who's going to be able to use that trash room. Here's the trash room again. This is the Michigan Theater restrooms. These are, I'm assuming, egress doors, emergency egress doors, day-to-day use. Here's the walkway going by. It's kind of interesting. The facade here is bowed in order to give you a little more clearance to be able to see around this corner for pedestrians that will be rounding the curve. This dashed line is the line of the floor above. So this will be essentially an overhang over the pedestrian walkway. This is just a second floor footprint, floor plan. As an example, it's a kind of a difficult building to look straight on at and understand what's going on. So the ground floor is 5.5 feet out from the second floor and up, so that they have the necessary clearance from the property line to be able to put windows back here. That's also true here. There's a notch in this part of the building with a line of windows going up it. And same in the back here, there's another notch out of the back corner. A new building that is not in the historic district, that is a completely separate project, but related to this one, intertwined with this one more or less, is proposed on the back. So there are no features of the back wall because it will be a partial party wall. On the roof, we've got an elevator overrun going up, some mechanical equipment. There are a couple of sections in the packet. Here are those Michigan Theater restrooms. This is the existing Michigan Theater building. There's a lot of mechanical equipment up on the roof, and the roof has a couple of different levels. The maximum height that they're proposing for this building at the top of the mechanical stuff, I think is on the next one, is 70 feet maximum, not to exceed. This building could not be integrated into the site for the 626 Washington building, which is behind it, which is a different site plan, because then it would touch the historic district, and that building would not qualify for any premiums, and they wouldn't be able to make it nearly as tall as they can without touching the historic district. So here's the facade that faces East Liberty. This is the south side of the building. Let me flip to my notes here a minute. There's some stone trim. There's brick. There's more on the other elevation than on this one, but there is brick up to from the second to the fourth stories here. Even with my glasses, I'm not going to be able to read the materials on here. Let me see if I can see it on my large version. Thank you. That's what I need. So there are metal panels capping the roof, and these are fiber cement panels, all of the tan parts that you see. There's stained concrete at the base on this part around the roll-up trash door, and stretching around the other side of the building you'll see in a minute. These are painted, I believe, concrete masonry units, and these are those egress doors that I pointed out from the Michigan Theater restrooms. So this band, if you'll recall, is recessed, and this is also recessed 5.5 feet. So this part of the building is at the property line, and these are set in. This is a central staircase. There are windows on this side elevation that you can't see in here because you're looking straight at them. That's an example of what the stained concrete on the first floor might look like. This elevation has, not sure why it got cut off. It might just be shrunk on our screens here. But it does have the brick on the second, third, and fourth floors, and the fiber cement panels up on the top. This, I believe, is more of a flat surface, except on the far right, on the far north side. There's another jog. let's see, this must be facing, this is the west elevation. So this is what would be up against the Michigan Theater building. And then there are several massing contextual drawings. This computer screen is very distorted. It's making it look really tall and skinny when it's a little more cube-like. So you may want to refer to the big handout, which is more accurate. But this is the companion project that's proposed on East Washington behind these buildings. This is the Michigan Theater building here. This is the front facade of the Michigan Theater building. This is the big theater itself. So like, for example, this is that little salads up, this is the alley, this is the end unit of the Michigan Theater building. Savas is over here on the right. Another massing view, this is on South State Street, looking down that alley. This building is Savas, and there's the larger building on the corner. That's a modern building that has the Starbucks on the corner. This is Elaine Hall. It's like a 3.5-story building. It's got a strange, very tall parapet on the top, and the first floor is kind of elevated off the ground. Now we're on the west side. This is East Washington Street, this is East Liberty Street, so we're looking through the Michigan Theater, which you see, this is the Michigan Theater roof right here. And now we are on the north side. Again, Michigan Theater, Elaine Hall, and Savas is a step down. These are interesting drawings. This top is obviously a photograph of the existing conditions. And then you see the buildings blocked in with, this is the one that we're considering today, behind it. And then that's the other companion project that will be a separate site plan project. Here we are looking down the Savas alley at the wall of the Michigan Theater. That's this big orange thing back here. And here's the proposed new building. The main doorway will be on this, let's see, east-facing elevation for people who actually live there to go in and out of. This is the view from East Washington Street. This is Elaine Hall. This is the proposed new building. The building that we're talking about is back here. But you can see the relationship of the two and how this will be connected by this pedestrian walkway to East Washington Street. And this is what, looking down that same East Washington Street pedestrian walkway, this is let me get my bearings. This is the Elaine Hall on the left, the other new project on the right, and this is the building that we're talking about right here. And you can see how that corner overhangs here so that when you're walking along, you can see around the corner to see what's coming. These are hipsters hanging out in front of the front doors. Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines, the ones that best apply to new buildings are 9 and 10. I've read you both of those already. From the guidelines for building site, it's recommended to retain the historic relationship between buildings, landscape features, and open space. In a way, this is just replacing a building that used to be much smaller but was in the same footprint. Historically, there has been a building in this space. Recommended for the design of missing features is designing and constructing a new feature when the historic feature is completely missing, or be a new design. That would be this, that is compatible with the historic character of the building and site, and that is what you are deciding. Not recommended is introducing a new building or site feature that is out of scale or of an otherwise inappropriate design. From the district or neighborhood setting standard guidelines for alterations and additions, not recommended is introducing new construction into historic districts that's visibly incompatible or that destroys historic relationships within the setting. The design guidelines from the City of Ann Arbor for all new construction, it's appropriate to design new buildings to be compatible with but discernible from surrounding buildings that contribute to the overall character of the historic district in terms of height, form, size, scale, massing, proportions, and roof shape. For all new construction, it's not appropriate to introduce any new building that's out of scale or otherwise inappropriate to the setting's historic character. And also not appropriate is introducing a new feature that's visually incompatible or that destroys the patterns of the site or the district. All right, let me go back to some of the staff comments. A lot of this I've already explained. Keep in mind that though 70 feet is very tall in a district of 2- and 3-story buildings, it is 75 feet, this front facade, from East Liberty and 150 feet from South State. So that will certainly affect the pedestrian or driver's perspective on how tall this building looks. The flat roof form is appropriate for the South State and East Liberty commercial buildings. Sustainable building massing, there was no mention of sustainable building design in the application. The building will not shade the fronts of any adjacent historic buildings. There are other, I'm not going to go through all of these because you've already had a chance to read them. I at first was concerned about this trash door here, this being the vista that you would see from East Liberty as a pedestrian, but really this is an alley to a service area. Yeah, you can see it, but I'm really not that concerned. This is the only place that you can get a garbage truck in to service a building like this, and it's certainly better to consolidate all of the trash into one interior space than to just leave it flowing all over the place like it is now. In some, staff believes that the proposed building is reasonably compatible with surrounding historic structures and the State Street Historic District, and that it meets the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines in the Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines. Thank you.
All right. Commissioners Cope and Rockland.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is a really interesting application. The site itself, obviously, is one reason. Also, just the fact that it seems like it's 3 players, 3 of the neighbors are all working together on this project. And then also it's, obviously, did you say intertwined? Was that the word? It's intertwined with a large proposal on Washington. So it's just so fascinating. There's a lot to cover, obviously, because of that. And staff covered a lot of it. There are a couple of questions for me. I think being there on the site, and this isn't the most critical one, but the one that comes to mind first is just the back of the building, the Savas building, the building that Savas is in, where the building fell down. There's nothing in this packet that describes what they're going to do with that building, except they show a rendering. One of the very last renderings is a great view down that new pedestrian walkway, and they show the back of Savas building without any of the venting and anything. And I don't know how realistic, actually being out there on the site and seeing the condition of that building, and just seeing the mechanicals that are there, I'm just, that'll be a question that I have.
This photo is
Right,
right
yeah.
there on
Yeah,
this rendering?
that's the rendering I'm talking about,
That
yeah.
photo?
Right,
Wow.
yeah.
Well,
It's there.
yeah, yeah.
So, let's see. I don't know if this was mentioned or not, I didn't hear it, but the Savas walkway that's would be access from State Street, it's my understanding after the site meeting that that's only available when Savas, the restaurant, is not using that for seating. So I think that was mentioned before maybe, but what else was missing? I guess just, I don't know how to describe it, but the site right now is well, we were there, it was wet too, so it's just an unpaved surface, or it might be paved in spots, and it just feels like there's trash everywhere. I don't think there actually was trash everywhere. There was trash where the trash was mostly by the dumpsters, but it just has that feeling of, you know, it just really felt like what it was. It's the back of several different properties, and everyone's kind of using it right now as their backyard, as you would. And so it's another thing in this project that I'm thinking of is, well, why is that going to change just because there's now a new building there? I think it's what helps this application is what I brought up first, which is that it's all of the owners around there seem to have some part of being on the team of this project. So possibly that will help, but that's the case right now. And there's, you know, that's the state of the site. So I guess I'll just leave it at that if you have other questions. But.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I think going into the discussion, probably a lot more will come up. The one thing I do think it's interesting is the building is actually on the property for Sava's building. And when it's built, it's not going to be connected to it at all. It's going to be connected to another building of another building owner at that. Not that that matters, but I just thought that was an interesting way to use the site.
Okay, good. Would the applicant please come forward, provide your name for the record, and sign in? And if you have anything to add to the staff report and the review committee reports, feel free to report.
Get all of them.
My name is Brad Moore. I'm one of the architects on the project. I have with me here a fellow architect from ESG, as well as a representative of CA Ventures and Mr. Howard Frise, the gentleman who owns the property that Sava's is on. The proposed developments are a partnership or a joint effort between Mr. Frise and CA Ventures. And I've been working with ESG on the design for both projects. We've been going through the design review board part of the process on the high-rise building, and then we're coming for the low-rise building to you guys, and we're hoping that they'll be moving fairly parallel through the approval process through Planning Commission and City Council. I'll let Neil here from ESG speak to some of the design elements. If you have questions for the property owners, or that I can answer.
Sure. I'll just speak briefly. I think staff covered the exterior design and the site plan and the floor plans and sort of the proposed construction nature of the building very well. I will just note that the main building materials and the design changes incorporated some great feedback we received from you last time we were here. I'm wondering if that was 2 months ago now in January. And just to overview those, kind of a classic color brick there mix, brown-red, a champagne color of metal panel and fiber cement, as well as the scored block there with anti-graffiti coating is really that sort of earthy tone. The precast black material that you noted there, that was noted by staff, is a strong material that our firm has used elsewhere around the country, actually, but pretty successfully in urban conditions like this, where it sort of might receive a lot of sort of hardy use and you know, some you know. It absorbs the urban condition pretty well as a base material. So that wraps around, including on the east side of the building, where there's significant storefront glazing for the lobby of the apartment building, as well as the entry, just the entry doors themselves. So addressing a few of the things that were already brought up, I'll maybe throw it back to Brad, unless there's questions more about the architecture, which I can answer while I'm up here.
I have some questions on the architecture.
Say
I have some questions on the architecture. I'll
Sure.
be quick. So some of the guidelines mention This is in the new construction in historic commercial settings. They talk about building modules and articulation. Could you kind of walk into this? You talked about kind of the materials of this area.
Yep.
So would you be able to talk about how these planes are, how do they fit in? We don't have a good section that kind of shows us in detail about all these, or is it all flat?
It's fairly flat. There's articulation at each of the bands. So in the sections, you can see it. It is minimal, and it's probably 4 inches where the cast. So we start with the base, middle, and top, kind of following the guidelines. I think Steph alluded to that, but there is a page in the packet, for articulating that, and then I think referencing a graphic from the design standards.
Yeah.
So. Starting at the top, the metal cap does project out. I'm going to say, in the area of 4 inches on the max. You can sort of see it in the section if you really look closely at that scale. And then, that head part, the top of the building, does step slightly back, and then that cast stone band, which you see at floor line 5, does project out slightly. So there's some depth offered there. And then, again, the cast stone band at floor line 2 does a similar distance of projection out. Additionally, to answer the depth question, the windows and the spandrels between the windows, which isn't a true spandrel, it's a metal panel that's flanking the upper and lower portions of the windows, that is stepped back the depth of the life of brick. So,
It's probably like in line with the insulation behind the brick.
Correct, yeah, exactly. So the depth of the brick itself, so we're talking about 3 to 4 inches. There's not a true brick return there, but it is the depth of the brick itself.
All right, and then the image that we have up on the screen, is that the cast in place stained concrete example?
It is,
photo?
yeah, that's an example of a column application in urban condition. And in Minneapolis, and so that is that project's been there about 8 years, and it actually looks, it's one of the few materials that looks better after a little time and a little aging.
Yeah.
It's one of those that takes on a patina a little bit over time, slightly, but it's a nice application directly onto a concrete, whether that be cast in place concrete or precast.
All right, and then further questions, architecturally speaking, for the doors. For the doors on the first floor.
The doors on the first floor?
Yeah, so there are 2 that are labeled as just hollow metal doors. They look like they're flat, pretty banal looking.
They are. We're thinking those are hollow metal flat doors, black to sort of fade away into the distance. Those are exit, if you see in the floor plans, those are exit doors, utilitarian doors.
One's into the trash room in that
Yeah.
elevation.
One's into the trash room, and then one is a stair exit, yep. And then on that side, there is the overhead door for the trash room itself, where the dumpsters would come out and be picked up.
Okay. And that, to me, is probably the only visual connection from the Liberty Street side straight back that we'd probably be able to see, right? It kind of picture frames that door.
Yes. So depending on the angle, you would possibly see the earthy material to the left if you were on the right hand side,
Really
along the sidewalk on Liberty. But if you were on the left hand side along the sidewalk on Liberty, looking down between the buildings, you would probably only see the stained concrete and the overhead door. That's correct.
Okay.
And including, you'd see past, through the walkway to Washington as well, I think, at that point.
All right, any other questions architecturally out there?
I'll speak here.
Okay.
Just
more.
kind of quick, so in the sections, you show, and staff pointed out, the elevator overrun and some mechanical equipment, but the elevations and the street views, are those modeled? Are those in the model, the roofscape?
You seem out of there.
You seem pretty
They're not.
clean.
That's correct. They're not shown on a true elevation. However, in an actual perspective, the elevator runs are minimal to the point where you wouldn't see them from the ground in a true perspective. So as she flips through those, especially those views from as far back as 150 feet on State Street or 70 feet on Liberty Street, the overrun and mechanical would not be seen from that direction, I think, is what those perspective renderings are proving out. So, but you're correct. They're not technically shown on the elevations.
But you've studied it and they don't
In terms
show
of the
up,
setting
like-
the height of those?
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So the section you're seeing there
Sounds
would be
like a
the
model.
height we're
So
proposing.
in the renderings,
Yeah,
they're
so-
not showing.
Yeah.
From what you've seen, working through it, it's minimal, if anything, that's what's shown.
Right, right. As you know, an elevation isn't ever
Right.
truly seen.
Yeah.
But in a perspective view, they would not be seen from those.
Okay.
Yep.
And then, and this may get to more of like the ownership side of the discussion, but I was just curious, the alley to the south connecting to Liberty, it didn't appear that the pavement or portions of that were rendered in the application, and I'm just wondering how that is going to plan to be handled, and
So-
it seems like a critical part of,
So
Project.
the property that we own or control runs from the property that we're talking about today, the 212 South State North. And so we control that, we can design it. The existing kind of T-shaped private alley
yeah.
due south of us is not under our control. It's jointly owned by the adjacent building owners on either side of that alley. One thing that is probably not common knowledge, if you're looking at this slide, the Michigan Theater Foundation building is the tall building. Wow, my pointer's not showing up on that.
I can sort of see it.
It's that tall
But you
building
can't.
with the white roof.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that marquee which comes to the street is also part of the Michigan Theater Foundation on the first floor. But all the building that flanks that entry is a separate building with a separate ownership. So even though we're coordinating and participating with the Michigan Theater, who are
Yes.
on board, and we're working with them to give them brand-new bathrooms, that building, which people commonly misperceive as being owned by the Michigan Theater, is owned by a company in Boston. And we're negotiating with that company as well as with the owner of the salad building next door on a joint design of what that could become. We're contributing an allocated space on our property to house those dumpsters as part of what we're contributing. But the actual fleshing out of the design of what those pavers could be, what the security lighting would be, all that kind of stuff is going to happen after this project, just because there's so many more people involved in the negotiations.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Rocco.
While we're on the topic of dumpsters, let's talk about, in the new proposal or in the other building, you know, what's the use of the dumpster room there? Who gets to use it?
So in that building, we're still working with the city and the DDA to identify who has the access to those dumpsters. Right now, anybody walking down the street can, put something in there. But once they're in the room behind that door, the man door, person door on the east, which you asked about, John, that has the hollow metal door, will have a key code combination. So those people who are actually paying for that dumpster pickup and have the use of those dumpsters will have access to that room. So that would be Saab, as we know, and the salad business, et cetera, would have access to that room to continue the use of those dumpsters once they're inside. But they would be limited to whoever's paying for those connections.
Okay, and then, is there another dumpster room for the high-rise that's going up on
Completely
Washington?
separate, yeah, that one will actually be accessed off of Washington
Yeah,
Street.
okay.
And with a completely different set of, that'll have a compactor.
Right.
for the high-rise.
So the amount of new trash being put in that dumpster is just limited to the 70-story building that we're talking about today. Now, once it goes behind the door, I guess all the folks that are throwing stuff in that dumpster today that aren't paying for it will have to find a new place to throw their stuff out.
Or contribute to the collection of it. Yeah, I mean, if they're gonna pay to have it picked up as part of their services, then they would have access to it.
It's possible that one of the property owners could decide to have their own dumpster back there.
That would be up to the city's trash
The
collection.
city would.
Yeah. I don't think they would give them a separate dumpster. I think they would just make them pay for what they've been using for free.
So would the dumpster room have to operate as a open the door, roll the thing out, then
Correct.
bucket lift it?
Correct.
So is there room for more than one type of dumpster, like a recycling bin and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so there's room for the 2 green dumpsters that are there, plus the grease collector.
Okay. Any other questions?
Question about the backside of the Saba building.
Oh, yeah. Since this project doesn't have ownership of the Saba building, I expect what's the plan to treat that area with all the ductwork?
Howard is here. He can address it. Our thought at this time, we can't reroute them through the building because the second floor is leased to the U of M. So for the time being, we would just paint them out. But eventually, as that building changes tenancy, there would be an opportunity for bringing them inside the building a little bit. For now, we can't bring them in because of the leasing structure of the floors above.
Yeah. And so what will go down is probably that wall that we see. Can you put your mouse on that wall?
Yeah, there's that wall
That
there,
wall.
and then there's the plywood and
Plywood
frame
stuff,
construction
that
all
would go
comes
down.
And then the clay tile wall that was original to the old garage building
Yeah.
will come down, and you'll see the actual back of the Goldberg.
Okay.
Gold.
Okay, well, any other questions? All right, I'm sure potentially other stuff might come up. Can you go to the, well, no, let's get it for now. All right. Any other questions? No. Moving on to the public hearing. Are there members of the public who would like to speak on this agenda item? No. I'll close the public hearing portion, and you can be seated. Thanks. Would any commissioner like to make a motion on this application?
I'll go ahead.
Commissioner Coe.
Yeah, I'm on a roll.
You're on a roll.
I move that the commission issue a certificate of appropriateness for the application at 212 South State Street to construct a 6th-floor mixed-use building as proposed. The work is compatible in exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, and relationship to the adjacent and surrounding buildings, and meets the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitations and guidelines for rehabilitating historic buildings, and the Ann Arbor Historic Design Guidelines, particularly as they pertain to new construction in historic commercial settings.
We have a second.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Epperson. All right, is there further discussion on this motion? I was going to add some things really fast. So on to the Ann Arbor Historic District Guidelines, all new construction. The segment that says designing new buildings to be compatible with but discernible from surrounding buildings that contribute to the overall character of the historic district in terms of height, form, size, scale, massing, proportions, and roof shape. I think all of that seems to be in line with this building. If it was right at the Liberty Street, certainly it would be way too tall. But the fact that it's set back, I think does a good job of trying to kind of blend itself in. It's kind of, in my mind, kind of an exciting urban infill with a lot of complexities involved. And yeah, I think so far it complies. The last one I was going to say was about the new construction in historic commercial settings, building massing, part 4, building height. It just says that the building is comparable in height to the Michigan Theater. The neighboring structures are between 1 and 3 stories tall. It was the same kind of thing. If the new building is taller than the surrounding historic structures, the taller portion of the building should be stepped back significantly, which it is. So
Usually at this point, we talk about looming.
yeah, normally we come in and say looming. But
Right, but I don't believe it is.
yeah, even with the new project planned, which is definitively looming, but not on this application.
No.
I think even without that, this building to me wouldn't stand out as tremendously looming.
Right.
You know? So can you go to that site one again? The overall satellite?
Oh, the satellite.
Yeah, satellite. I did have a quick question. So the 4 houses that are being removed, there's no plans to relocate them or salvage the parts or anything like that?
We've been talking about making them available to anybody who would want to move them off the site. We don't have any plans as part of our project.
Okay. It's not in the historic district, we got that, but I should still ask, it's a structure.
Yeah, we've agreed to have, to allow Susan Weiler to come in and historically document all those structures before they get removed from the site or demolished.
Okay. All right, any discussion on the motion?
I agree that, that the scale is appropriate, and when you're on the site and, you know, okay, so the three neighboring historic structures that we're talking about, it's really the backs of those. So it's hard to say, okay, well, is it appropriate next to the backs of these, you know, the sides and backs. So then what you care about is being on the sidewalk, looking past the historic fronts and seeing this building. And so we did that on the site, sort of imagined it with these new materials that we're seeing. And, you know, I think in both cases, like from Liberty Street, it's an improvement, you know, and it's so not good to look at now that, you know, saying it's an improvement isn't like saying much, but it's an improvement. And
dirt. Yeah.
well, yes.
Yes.
And I'm optimistic that the new ownership will take care of that. You know, there's potential for abuse back there still, and it could, but I just think, you know, with this, yes, this exciting infill project, and I think we can just be, or I can personally be optimistic that this is going to be taken care of. And then from the State Street side, it's like almost no change, but slightly better too, because before you're looking at the side of the, again, I mean this in the most complimentary way to this project, you're looking at the side of the Michigan Theater, it's brick, you don't really notice it, and then this building will be relatively in your eye about the same size. You know, it's clearly going to be blocking the air handling units from the Michigan Theater, which I agree is a positive, and it's a clever way, I think, to say that's what the height of this building should be, because of we're accomplishing this thing, and in fact they are. And yeah, so I guess for those two main reasons, you know, I'm going to support this project.
Any other discussion?
Yes, I think it's interesting you read the line that you did from the city's guidelines. I, too, took note of that and felt that it, in some regard, met it, and in others did not. Height and size and somewhat scale, yes, it's tall, but it's set back, and that.
Jess, which line are you talking about, so I can follow
Sorry,
along with you?
so it's under Ann Arbor Historic District Design Guidelines for new construction, under appropriate, designing new buildings to be compatible with but discernible from surrounding buildings that contribute to the overall character of the historic district, yada, yada. But then, as a counter, not appropriate, introducing any new building that is out of scale or otherwise inappropriate, visually incompatible, introducing new construction onto a site or in a district which is visually incompatible in terms of size, scale, design, materials, and texture, or which destroys relationships on the site or the district. I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible. Reading through the application, kind of the meat of it, when describing the existing conditions of the context, it said full of character, iconic buildings, vibrant, pedestrian-friendly, 24/7 active area, rich variety, unique character, engaging, and full of life. When I look at the Liberty Street rendering, which, in my opinion and experience downtown, to me that would probably be the most dynamic entry through the cross-block alleyway. And unfortunately, it seems like it's the least developed of the views. And I know that, you know, to some extent, that portion is not on your site. You don't own it, so there is that unknown. But I think in terms of the building and that facade, there are ways that it could be improved and working with what you already have. There was reference to the diagram of the base, the middle, and the cap, which are in the guidelines for the city. And I think the elevation that we're looking at here seems almost upside down in terms of proportion. I would kind of want to see the base read as the first 2 floors almost. And then you'd have the middle and then the cap being that champagne paneling kind of as the crown of the building. That would feel like more of a balanced, proportionate building. And probably even from the State Street view, I don't know if we can jump to that quickly. It may help perceive where the entrance is of that building. Right now, at empty tables, it's very hard to see where the entrance is, but if you raised that cornice and the dark surface or the presence of the first 2 floors, or even 1.5 floors, however that ends up being articulated, might help give that entrance more grounding there. And this view, and then there's a rendering looking down the Washington alley, which gives a better sense of the depth of the facade. Yeah, that one. I think that sort of detailing and treatment, if it wrapped around to the south side, would help articulate and break down the scale of that elevation to the south. And also maybe continuing the middle band of brick, which we lose on the western portion of the south facade. So it just seemed like there wasn't much attention given to that elevation, whereas that and the east view would either be equivalent in terms of articulation and detailing, or even more so on the south because of the amount of pedestrian traffic that it would receive and views of it. Even in comparison to the companion building behind it, I think you would want to have that view be more supportive of the building beyond it. And right now it almost blends in with the ghosted context. It doesn't even seem part of the design.
All right, so Commissioner Keanu, I'm going to push back a little bit. The south elevation that we see on this elevation, it does look pretty stale. I'll agree with that. There's 2 things I'll push back on. One is, can you go to the elevation that shows I would say the more improved rendering showing the Washington Street view? Washington. Yeah, so, go one more. So here you could tell this one's a little better rendered, like it came out more,
Sure.
a little more polished.
Right.
So I think the intent is that this is what is wrapping around to the other side, to the south side. I think that's the intent, is that this is the same as the south side.
Right, in terms of material and depth, but the composition.
The composition I still think is the same. You've got the bands at the bottom and at the top that are still coming around to the side of that building.
I think
on the south side.
I would appreciate more punctuation of the facade. It's very flat.
Yeah, I mean, overall in general, I'd say, yes, you're right on that. The whole facade is fairly flat, that if we can get the brick to actually have a turn rather than just be stale, it's not just a good building science detail, but it also improves the overall performance of the building.
Yeah. Right.
I agree to that part. And then I'm also going to push back a little bit on this alley, because to me, this alley is a quirky alley. To me, it's got the murals painted on it. To me, it's not really meant to be kind of a thoroughfare or vibrant life area. The other entry that they're making from William Street and from State Street, to me, are the vibrant areas, particularly because of Elaine Hall. And it's, can you go to that rendering too? Yeah, particularly with Elaine Hall and the Savard building, Where this area, to me, is kind of a vibrant area of the city's streetscape. And being able to look back, we brought this up in the working session, that we wanted to, my push personally was that we didn't want to show an entry feature. We wanted to make sure that our purview is to preserve the view of the historic structures, and that they had an entry feature. Remember, they had a full story entry feature at one point?
I should have
It was
pulled this
like
document.
it was
I
like
don't
band
remember that one.
light that they had going all the way up.
Well, yeah, and I'm not talking about going all the way up.
Yeah, and I was just pushing to get
Yeah.
rid of that and just maintain it so that the historic structures were the highlight of that view.
Sure,
So that's my pushback.
okay.
I want to step in on this because I actually agree more with Commissioner Keanu's statements, mostly on the, I think on the proportioning, the base, middle, and cap, and also I agree more on the Liberty facade that while I think that it makes sense that that needs to be a place of utilitarian use, I think that as you are standing on Liberty, especially us across the street, facing the Michigan Theater, so if we look at that rendering of Liberty, there's quite a view shed down Liberty toward Michigan Theater and back through that alley. So then this building comes out quite a bit. It has a pretty visible facade on that side. So I think as far as setting and material, or scale and material, I'm still questionable particularly for this facade. I agree on the State Street side that, especially in the more detailed rendering, that you're getting a lot more of that articulation. And I think the scaling is working a little bit better on that facade, partially because that view shed on State is compressed. The views that they're showing from Washington are more compressed, but on this Liberty side, where you really see a majority of the facade, I don't think it's quite compatible. Like I said, I agree with the comment about the base, middle, and capital that Commissioner Keanu made. I think it's a little bit, the proportioning is slightly off. I'm also not 100% sold on the fiber cement panel, especially the sizing of those panels. And just in general use of fiber cement panels that we've seen in other applications, especially at that size, they tend to degrade pretty rapidly over time and don't look quite as nice. So.
Yeah, I was looking at that beginning, the base, middle, top as well. And at first I looked at this and said, yeah, that's not much of a base. And was like, oh, it would be better to have a two-story base. It would be more pronounced. But at the same time, I keep falling back on the fact that we're trying to preserve the historic features of the site, which to me are the buildings in front of it. And whatever's behind it should drop away and not compete. This is my opinion. And so we have a two-story up in front with the cafe and the salads up. The salads up is like a one-story at most. And so by introducing a two-story base or increasing the height of that base at all, to me would compete with the historic buildings up front, which to me are the highlight of the block. But, yeah.
I mean,
It's
they're all different
whether or not
viewpoints,
we, yeah, it's whether or not we think that the project as proposed fits within the guidelines.
right. I'm also just now wondering about sorry, I forget your name. Neil.
Yes, sir.
You'd commented on the durability of that stained concrete material, how it's been holding up pretty well.
Yeah, it seems to do better than when a metal application or a masonry application is brought, all the way to the base. So particularly it being concrete itself, and then the application of that.
I know that well, based on the section or the elevations, that first story is 11.5 feet. Or no, not, what does that say?
Yeah, it's
Just wanting
11.5 feet as a floor to floor.
Before you get to the brick. Just thinking it's an alley condition in terms of, there's a lot of tagging around town.
Yeah, we have
Would
proposed
that hold up better than the
Right, particularly in
break?
this part of town, with Graffiti Alley being nearby and other spots where that's been going on. So that south facade that has the earth tone kind of tan at level 1, I think we call it scored, scored block. That is going to have an anti-graffiti coating on it.
How about the concrete?
So the concrete would be a clear coating, but also have or highly washable properties to it. We also intend to have a light level in that pedestrian mid-block connection and also security cameras that we feel would deter the tagging that's going on that side of the Michigan Theater so that Graffiti Alley stays on the west side.
I can see the door being tagged pretty quick, so I'm wondering if like a nice mural goes on the door. The insulated door, it's a black door, it's gonna
We'd be happy to
really-
come back with a mural proposal.
Yeah.
We just need to pick an artist.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, it's an urban condition.
It is.
It's gonna happen, it's an alley. But that was another thought, perhaps to help mitigate, was if you raise the cast stone, is probably gonna get hit with something. I
Just
don't know.
to John's comment, our previous machination of this elevation, we had a much less broken up facade. That middle band of windows wasn't there. So that entire eastern portion was all flat and windowless. So one of the comments we heard was, see if you can add visual interest, because that's lining up with the alley. So can we do something to add visual interest? And that's how we added the band of windows. But we also fairly strongly thought we heard, please make a background building to John's
To me, it's a
point.
background building.
Yeah, so that's why there's not a lot of ornate treatment on that base on this side. That in combination with, it is going to have to have a utilitarian function. We're not going to be pulling
Right.
trash trucks down from Washington. But the other thing to be mindful of is that the tenants, the leasing for this building is going to be occurring in the high-rise building. So that's where people are going to be coming to get their mail and pick up their packages and all that kind of stuff. So the primary access is going to be from the Washington Street side rather than Liberty side. Just, we hadn't mentioned that, so.
I understand. I mean, the east elevation is also part of this background building, and it's articulated, I think, in a more successful way than the south elevation. So,
All right,
So
any
that-
further discussion on the motion? Anyone? All right, why don't we move to a vote? All those in favor of the motion, please say yes.
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 All those opposed, please say no.
no.
The motion does carry. Your application has been approved, and you will receive written notification from staff. Please note that you must apply for any required permits from the city before beginning your project. Thank you. On to the next agenda, which is buried over here. The next agenda item. Oh, we're on new business. G, right? G1, draft lighting ordinance presentation and discussion.
Do you have my slides, or do you want me to?
Why don't you, yes, I do have your slides. Let me get your slides.
I mean, I've got it right here if you wanted
Because I
to.
got to get out of here.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh,
Brad,
Brad.
do you want these?
We'll take them if you.
Take them back, because, yeah. You can use them for other things, other presentations, and certainly rather it be reused.
I got one too.
Pretty much just sit back here.
Would have looked at it.
Yeah, I'll just sit there. Okay. I'll take notes. Voting ordinance, maybe.
Oh, I'm stretching.
This one for you. No, she's not. She's the opposite of a. Yeah. Oh, and there's penguins in here too. Oh, yeah.
Good? Yep. All right. That might stand a little just because my legs are tight.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you so much for letting us present tonight. I know you have a very long evening, and we really appreciate this opportunity. My name is Sally Uwe. I'm from the University of Michigan. I'm an astronomy professor, and we also have Planning Commissioner Erica Briggs with us. We are here to present to you a draft lighting ordinance for Ann Arbor, and this addresses a problem of serious concern regarding, as I shall show, the environment, health, and also ambiance, as well as energy, because this is actually being sponsored by the Energy Commission. Light is a form of energy, and so any form of wasted light is wasted energy, and what you see right here in front of you is a view from space of our area, and all of this light that's going up into space is not serving anybody at all, so it is pure wasted energy. We have formed a joint working group. Basically, as I mentioned, this is sponsored by the Energy Commission. So John Mirsky of the Energy Commission is kind of the champion from the Energy Commission in this effort. I have kind of been the sort of lead of this committee. I am a community member. As I mentioned to you, I'm a professor of astronomy, but we have organized a coalition called Michigan Dark Skies right here in Ann Arbor to advocate for this. In addition to that, we have two planning commissioners who are helping us now. Erica is here with us. Erica is also executive director of Scenic Michigan. And Sarah Mills, also on the planning commission. We're also working with someone from the International Dark Sky Association, which is an international organization to advocate for dark skies. And finally, Mary Stewart Adams, who is a dark sky advocate here in the state of Michigan, and she is the founder of the International Dark Sky Park up in near Mackinac called the Headlands. So Michigan Dark Skies is the local advocacy group here in Ann Arbor. It consists of these organizations that you see listed here, including the Sierra Club and a couple advocacy groups for birds, Washtenaw Safe Passage and Detroit Audubon. Basically, light pollution is a problem that has been increasing at a rate of about 6% per year. You can see the map here of what the US looked like around 1950 or in the 50s. Then you see the map in 1997, and you can see now something that was compiled a year or two ago. Basically, all of those yellow areas are regions where the ambient light is twice its natural value, and then the red goes to 9 times higher, basically. So this problem is continuing to increase all the time. And it's basically something that seems to follow what is called Jevons Paradox, which is something that has been observed with respect to energy. This graph that I'm showing you is specifically related to lighting as was measured in the United Kingdom over the last few centuries from the year 1700. What I'm showing here is the cost of lighting in the dashed line. And then you can see that as the cost of lighting goes down from the year 1700 to 2000, you can see that the usage per capita of lighting actually increases to exactly offset that. So right now we're in an LED revolution. LEDs have been a wonderful thing in terms of being able to save energy, being able to do a lot of lighting very, very cheaply. But if we actually want to realize that energy efficiency, then we actually need to have some kind of legislation, because otherwise, according to Jevons Paradox, we're basically just going to do more and more lighting. So that's what the motivation is here. Now, this is a significant issue with respect to biology and human health. Just a couple years ago, the Nobel Prize was awarded for discoveries related to the circadian rhythms. And it turns out that, for example, melatonin is the hormone that's emitted when you are, well, that's related to the circadian rhythms, basically when you're sleeping and when you're awake. And it turns out to have significant health consequences when it's disrupted. That also applies to animals, so it's a significant concern for the environment where the ecosystem is disrupted, animal behavior is disrupted, and so forth. So right here in Washtenaw County, there are several organizations, in particular Washtenaw Safe Passage, which is concerned about this problem as well. Birds are especially sensitive to nocturnal ambient light. And right here in the Great Lakes area, we are on the bird migration highway, so to speak. So most of the time when birds are killed, they are killed by colliding with buildings. And a lot of this migration happens at night. And so birds actually try to navigate by the light of the moon and other natural light sources. And when they see artificial sources, they're actually very, very confused, and they end up running into buildings. And so up to 1 billion birds a year are killed annually. Right here you can see a picture of the bird kill from one building in Ipsy in one night during the migration season. And so there are various organizations in our general area that are advocating to turn lights off at night during the migration season. It's not just birds, but there are other species as well. Nocturnal pollinators that could be economically important. Insects, bats in Florida, sea turtles are a very famous example of animals that are affected by light pollution and artificial light, and as well fish and salmon and other economically viable species. So we ourselves are affected by ambient light at night. The American Medical Association has put out a very strong statement about light pollution. As I mentioned, melatonin is a very important hormone, and when it's disrupted, and when you disrupt your sleep cycle, the AMA has said that there's evidence that links these disruptions to cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. In addition to that, you're all familiar with the phenomenon of glare. When you have too much light glaring into your eyes at night, that's basically the contrast, which is so bright it doesn't let you see very well. And so that's actually a safety hazard at night. And also, blue light tends to be more damaging than red light. So that has been associated with actual damage to the retina when you have blue light in excess, and LEDs do tend to have much bluer light than other natural sources do. So it's also a health concern for humans. So there's 3 basic types of light pollution. There's glare, which we just mentioned. It's like really bright light that's contrasting against a dark background that makes it hard to see. It's called disability glare. There's light trespass. The classic example is when you get your neighbor's light shining into your bedroom window at night. And then there's sky glow, which is when the sky is unnaturally bright due to all the scattered light from the ground. And that's, of course, the kind that astronomers are very concerned about. So we are a daytime species. We are biologically programmed to be afraid of the dark. And so we tend to increase the lighting as we become more and more active at night. And safety is considered like the main reason why, or one of the more important reasons why we light up our environment. But it should be pointed out that more light, higher levels of light, does not necessarily make things safer. And there have been decades of studies that basically have failed to find a distinct correlation between lighting brighter and having a safer environment. There are various reasons for this. One of them is that when you over-illuminate things, it actually causes shadows, and shadows actually provide opportunities for bad actors to hide. In addition to that, glare, as I mentioned, actually reduces visibility and therefore is a problem with safety also. When you're in a very bright environment, then your eyes naturally adjust to the bright light. So then when you step out into the darkness, then your eyes aren't dark adapted anymore, and so that's a problem. And then finally, the targets are illuminated when you illuminate everything. So you're helping bad guys and you're helping good guys. So lighting things up just helps everybody, not just the people that you're trying to help. You alluded just now, you heard the proposal to have the alleyways being lit up. So that may or may not help with what the intention is. So here's an example. This is a photograph showing a very brightly lit area. And you can see that basically these lights are lighting up the trees, which is not particularly useful. And there are also a lot of deep shadows there. And you can see a person standing in the middle there. So with this very bright lighting, the person probably feels safe, and it's a very typical kind of lighting that you might see. Now we see the same scene, and this person is actually still in this picture, but very difficult to detect. Do we know how to turn this backwards, the slide?
If you roll up a little bit.
Roll up? Okay. Yeah, right, there we go. So there's the person. And then if I move forward again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you could notice, the person is actually under this light pole right here now in the shadow. So that's an example how poor lighting, right, really hasn't really helped you, even though you've provided a lot of lumens there. And then there's glare, so you've probably experienced this directly. Here we see a scene that has a lot of glare in it, and if the lamp were just shaded, oops, oh, sorry, this is a PDF, okay. I'm sorry, one of my good demos here, but if this scene were shaded, you would be able to see that there's actually a person standing right there. You can see his legs, right? And in this one, again, if you shade out your left hand over here, you can actually see that there's a person standing in that gateway there. So if you were, and I have this in my PowerPoint actually, but I apologize. So you would be able to see much, much better if you had these lamps adequately shaded. Okay, so I mentioned blue light. Blue light is more of a problem in a number of ways. It scatters far more strongly, meaning that when you have blue light, it causes a lot more scattering of that blue light. It will scatter everywhere and cause light pollution. It will spread and so forth. In addition to that, it also causes more glare in your eye, again, partly because it scatters more. So that means that it causes more vision problems than red light. And also, blue light tends to destroy your night vision much more quickly than red light, which is why astronomers walk around with little red flashlights instead of blue flashlights. In addition to that, the AMA, as you see here, also is making a statement about the LED lamps, which are more blue, and that they are more disruptive to the circadian rhythms as well. So the good news about all this is that it's actually a very easy problem to address. All you have to do is these 4 bullets. Light only what is needed, light no more than what is needed, light only when you need it, and light no bluer than needed. So once you do that, the problem is gone. It's not like a dioxane plume that is a permanent problem thereafter. So that is the great news about this. And here in Michigan, actually, people are relatively aware compared to some other states. I think we are well ahead of the curve in many ways. Our Department of Natural Resources in the state has designated 6 state parks as dark sky preserves. That's very unusual to have come from the state level. Normally, these dark sky parks are designated by the International Dark Sky Association. In this case, it was the state of Michigan that did it on its own, which is phenomenal. We do have an International Dark Skies Park, which is the Headlands that I mentioned earlier, and that's up near Mackinac. So in addition to that, we have 7. So that's 7 dark sky preserves that we have right here in Michigan. And the city of Ann Arbor, as you may know, has a sustainability initiative and a new Office of Sustainability and Innovation that is strongly supportive. So this initiative would be fully consistent with these kinds of goals. So for our lighting ordinance, we have these specific goals. First of all, we would like to protect the public health and safety. Secondly, protect the environment. Thirdly, promote energy efficiency, conserve resources, and reduce carbon emissions. Fourth, reduce costs to city public services and citizens. Fifth, support nighttime activities. And sixth, retain and enhance the city character. Those are basically the goals for our lighting ordinance. And this is the roadmap that we've got right now. Our working group was formed last August. A few weeks ago, Councilmember Kathy Griswold, who's very interested in lighting, has reviewed a copy of it. And then this week, we are making our presentation to you. The Planning Commission Working Group looked at it 2 nights ago, so they have a number of edits to make on this. They're mostly fairly minor edits. And then the Design Review Board also received a draft of it yesterday. So in the next couple months, we are hoping to make further revisions based on your input and these other commission inputs. We are hoping to get some final endorsements from the commissions and then have a public hearing, and then to City Council. So how did we put this together? We started out with some templates from communities that already have lighting ordinances. Most of these communities are fairly small compared to Ann Arbor. They're more like townships. We also worked with the International Dark Sky Association, which provided model lighting ordinances, and then we looked at a few other communities that you see listed here, in particular Tucson, which is a large metro area. And we then combined kind of all the different elements that we saw in these and crafted something that we feel is appropriate for Ann Arbor. So basically, we are seeking your input, and we're calling out a couple items here that may be of interest to you. For example, the facade lighting, curfews on lighting, but any other items that you may be interested in discussing, we would be very happy to talk with you about.
Sign lighting.
Excuse me?
Sign lighting.
Signage, yes. So that is in the sign ordinance, which is Erica's thing.
Yeah, so the sign ordinance is also getting updated, and a lot of, anything that's related to signage will be in that ordinance. And so we have alluded to it, but it'll pretty much be handled there. The exceptions would be canopy lighting, like Michigan Theater or the state, that sort of under canopy, which it's not exactly the sign, but that would fall in this.
How about ornery neighbors? Not you, Doug.
Yes, so this,
Like, what do you mean by that?
this ordinance would cover only private property for starters. We would like to look at the public rights of way, but because of the way that our regulations are structured, this would only cover private property for starters. So yes, it would cover ornery neighbors. There is a provision in there for light trespass.
Yeah, and so that, I could see that falling a lot in the historic district components, because there are a lot of wall packs that get put up on historic structures, not just downtown, but at residence. So if there's an element of trespass, I guess it wouldn't fall in our guidelines, but we would say that, don't forget you have to review the lighting ordinance. Is that how that would work for us?
Additions.
I don't know, how would this actually work? How would it be enacted on
How would it
private
be
property?
enforced also?
Well, I'll enforce it. I can get my ornery neighbor.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, so this will primarily be driven, I mean, in terms of enforcement, will be complaint driven in reality. In terms of the first question, which was?
And how would you apply this to someone who wants to put up a light on the side of their house and if their driveway is illuminated?
Right, so in terms of that piece, it will sort of, there's regulations in here in terms of the private residence, you're allowed a certain amount of lighting, and a lot of it just not trespassing on your neighbors. When it comes to commercial properties, there's a lot more to consider, I would say, in terms of if it's the color rendering of the light, the fixtures that are going to be used, thinking about the curfews. So there's a lot of components that would come into play more so in a commercial property than it would on a residential. So there's a lot of elements there.
So I have two quick questions. Can you go back one image? Oh. So these municipalities that have enacted something, on the first image that you gave us was also images of various areas of the United States that have changed over time?
It was just a map of the U.S. that basically showed kind of the
So
sky at night, yeah.
I'd be curious to see if these ordinances have any impact on those.
Oh, they do, yes.
Yeah, so
they
that would be a
certainly do.
cool little slide too, just to showcase. And then what was my other thing? I forgot, so it can go to.
I'll ask a
something else.
question while you think then.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate how ambitious this is, and I'm wondering, so for like the parameters of color rendering index and color temperature, I was surprised when I saw a CRI of 70, because that seems like really lousy light as far as my experience. I was wondering how you came up with 70 as your parameter, and then also 2700. I've tried to select luminaires where they just don't come lower than 3000. Yeah, 3000 seems like a really common. 2700 is like maybe one out of every few has the 2700, but I realize you're trying to get the blue light out, so can you talk to like maybe how you came up with both those parameters?
Yeah, sure. In fact, in the Planning Commission, the thing with the 3,000 versus 27 came up again there. So I think that we would probably seriously consider moving it to 3,000 because the exact same argument came up.
I'm not necessarily arguing that.
Yeah, no,
but I
no,
just
I
am curious
understand.
why you said 20, because I would have
Right.
thought default you would have said 3,000,
Right.
but you didn't.
You're
so
right,
why did
you're
you
right.
say 27?
Well, yeah, because we're trying to move redder.
Yeah, okay, all right.
But
So
yeah.
that's
So
what
it's
you want.
significant?
So 3,000, we did start with 3,000, actually,
Okay.
yeah. And then, in discussions with the International Dark Sky Association, they said that, you know, the standard was moving to redder. And, you know, we kind of consider, okay, well, those lights, the Cobra lights, what are they now? Anyway, the high pressure sodium lights, those are 22, you know, so it's kind of like, it seemed as though that would be a good thing to do. We didn't really think too much about the availability of what was there. So, you know, it seemed like a good number at the
Right,
time.
yeah.
But now that this issue has come up that you've mentioned and that one of the planning commissioners mentioned also, she's actually gonna go and look into it. So
Yeah,
she's an
it'd be
architect.
nice to have some
yeah.
data, yeah.
So she's gonna actually see whether it's
Yeah.
practicable and so forth. As for the CRI of 70, that was just kind of a default number at the time. So,
Yeah.
you know, we were told, oh, well, that's a number that will be available. So that was where we did consider availability. And I
Right.
said, well, that's gonna be available. I looked at a chart recently that I just saw, which showed that there was sort of a cluster of availability around 80, but again, it sort of depended on what color temperature you were using also. So
I also think the type of lamp you're using has a big determining effect on the CRI, right? So maybe a better parameter for CRI would be if you're using LED, it should be 80 plus. If you're using
Okay.
the sodium, the other one you mentioned, I don't think you can get anywhere near 80
That's a
on
good
one of those
point.
kind of
Okay.
lights. I think
Yeah.
each type of, the incandescent lamp, you know,
Based
is
on
100. So
Right.
like,
Yeah,
you know,
bulb
each
type.
type of lamp has its own kind of target CRI value.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Thank you.
Plus, CRI of 70 indoors looks terrible. CRI of 70 outside is, it's lighting outdoors. You know, it's not like you're trying to read a book. It's not like you're trying to emulate anything outdoors.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So yeah, so the purpose of having the CRI be as high as possible is actually to remove the blue light spike in
Yeah.
LEDs, yeah.
Okay.
It's not an aesthetic thing.
And this is an area certainly we would welcome more resources or feedback on as we're sort of crafting this over the next month or so as well.
I don't know, this isn't really my forte, but the state of Michigan just, I think they adopted a new energy code for new construction.
2013 energy code.
Is that the current one? And so I'm just wondering how that plays into all of this, because there are certain requirements that new construction will have to
Yeah.
meet. And so are we fighting upstream kind of thing?
It should
here? Again.
align or be better,
Yeah,
right?
Right, yeah, there's some,
Yeah, we're hoping that it'll align.
Influence there.
As our first exemption, we have that federal or state lighting regulations shall supersede the specifications of this lighting ordinance. So if at any point we're in conflict, that would override.
but if you're, trying to
Yeah,
gain momentum, all these different municipalities.
right.
So,
Yeah, can we just make a note of the 2013
Yeah, I don't know.
State of Michigan Energy? I'm sure
I don't
John will
think
know
it'll
about
exceed
that.
Michigan energy code, though.
No,
I
I'm
don't
just,
think they can.
it's just something to
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
in mind.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you for mentioning it.
So, yeah.
I'm trying to look at something in here that talks about the fixtures. Well, here it is. Like in general, now fixtures are coming out with something called a bug rating. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, actually, I heard they were moving away from bug readings
Oh,
now.
all right. Well,
But go ahead.
hone in on that maybe. Just figure out what's going on with it. Because it's still right now something that we're using for all the lead compliance.
Okay,
And
all right.
we foresee it in the future as something we'll be using because it's an alternative path
Okay.
to doing a photometric. So
Okay,
they can just get basic compliance if they show that each fixture meets bug rating.
So we had kind of decided not to use that at the point because we wanted to keep it as simple as possible. But, if you like them, I mean, we can certainly
Well, I don't know
put
if
them
I
in,
like it.
especially
I'm just
for-
saying it might be an easy tool for
Right,
some
no,
people.
if you actually think that they're convenient,
Yeah.
yeah, by all means.
It's
Now,
helpful for
for
my
homeowners-
electrical engineers when I just say, does it meet the
Right.
bug rating or not? And they're
Right,
like, yes,
okay,
okay, then
yeah.
we're good.
Okay. For homeowners, I think we
Homeowners, it
probably
might
don't
be
want to, right?
very
But
confusing.
for yeah,
Yeah.
commercial type buildings. Okay, thank you.
There are a lot of historic type fixtures that will have a hard time being compliant with the fully shielded aspect. Although they could, maybe someone is making sort of a lantern style that's actually a fake lantern that maybe would be in fact fully shielded. But I think that, you know, when I'm picturing like historic lights, that'll be a tough one to comply
Well,
with.
Have you shopped around? Because, you know, if I just Google,
Yeah.
you get a lot of historic looking designs.
That are fully shielded?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you do. I was impressed, but, you know, I'm not a designer or anything.
I suppose it would be whatever. If you wanted it to look like a lantern, then it probably wouldn't be fully shielded. But if it was more of a gooseneck style or something, which would be appropriate, you know, that might be appropriate here but not there, based on the project. But I believe you have something that says 20% of your facade can be lit with kind of any type of light. Was there something like that?
Yeah,
in there
we modified the facade thing slightly since the original, what we submitted, but yes, basically, I mean, that even went away, you know. What we're now recommending is just 10 feet from the facade, regardless of whatever you got, you know, what did we say, 1 foot candle?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that turns out to be pretty generous, because Erica and I actually went out in the field and
Okay.
did some measurements.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
now it's like, you know, whatever your ornamentation, you just, you know, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things we did do is to go out last weekend, Friday and Saturday night, with a light meter and start trying to validate kind of what are we seeing around the community, what is reasonable in terms of, you know, how are facades being lit up. We're trying to seek out historic structures as well, and what are the neighborhoods looking like. We didn't get to like the Old West Side. That's kind of next on my list, that we would actually go there and get some readings. But in a number of places, I mean, we've revised since what's in front of you right now, some of the parking lot lights recommendations based on some of the feedback that we got from there. But I think that's one of the pieces that we want to make sure that we're in line with what's reasonable, but also pushing the envelope a little bit in terms of, you know, what's available. So, but we'll make sure that we go out and check out kind of what's happening in historic structures. Yeah, one of the things that did come out from our kind of walking audit was, and that we mentioned, got support for in the Planning Commission meeting, was that we're seeing significantly greater light trespass in the kind of downtown development authority area than we would see in any other commercial area or residential area. And so what came out of that, and we welcome feedback from you as well, is should the standards for light trespass be greater in the DDA, which businesses are just right on top of each other. It's really hard not to spill over, and the lighting levels are significantly higher. But if you take that out to any other commercial area, there's really not an issue with that. And so lower standards are quite reasonable.
Yeah, so do you identify zones?
Right now?
Like the lighting zones that are characteristic in LEED?
Yeah, and so some of the ordinances that we looked at had really distinct lighting zones, like maybe 5 different levels. What we're contemplating right now are really 2 different levels, DDA and then everywhere else. So, you know.
For commercial though, because DDA, then commercial, and then residential.
So maybe 3.
Correct. Yeah, I guess there's 3. But in terms of commercial, I mean, there is commercial with, yeah, I guess there's 3 different zones, but.
Would the portion on interior lighting, talks about the source of exterior light trespass. That's a weird one for us in historic, I guess, because of people's lights in their homes. And another one that made me think about that was the parking garages. Like, does this apply to parking garages in some way? Because they spill tons of light everywhere. That's one thought. And then another thought was even this image that shows, you know, like the nice cutoff of the lights. You know, if this surface is really reflective, it just goes straight up. So I always wonder, like, all right, we have these nice cutoff fixtures, but there's so much reflected light. You know, it's kind of this offset of trying to make urban heat island effect and trying to remediate that. And now we get all these reflective surfaces where the lights hit. So how does that how does this come into play with that? Because I could see that that's a weird balance too.
Yep.
And
I think the only way that the reflected light is controlled is through the light trespass provision. So if at the boundary of the property you've reflected and it's above the allowed amount, then
they have to figure out how to
you just have to
shield
dim
it or move
yeah,
it,
well,
dim it.
it's not even shielding, it's you want to dim
Yeah.
the actual light.
One thing we did when we were going out, we were measuring both the luminescence, coming down and then also reflecting up. And we were looking at both standards, trying to figure out which one would be a better measure, because we determined it was more reliable to be measuring the light coming down, because it really depends on whether or not the surface level is brighter or darker. And so that's something that we actually might consider recommending, is that in certain areas we might start I don't know, it's just dawning me right now, we might start recommending that there's darker surfaces that wouldn't reflect up as much, right? Is that, we haven't talked about this, so I don't know if I'm throwing out something that doesn't make sense.
And that's that trade-off with urban need island.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Right,
just a question about
during the
historic
daytime.
buildings. If there is a historic fixture that does not comply with these regulations, it says that it can continue, but only until somebody applies for a building permit. So I've got a house, I've got a mansion, and it's got some really cool exterior historic fixtures, but I need to do work in the building. So this is saying that I would have to abandon those or replace them.
Dim
Are there
to
any-
1-foot candle.
Are there any exceptions?
They just have to be,
Or-
they can't be more than 1-foot candle at some distance away from the house.
But what if they are?
And what if they're not fully shielded? They have to be shielded, right? Everything has to
And
be
fully
shielded. So I think
So-
that's the
Ooh,
question,
I didn't
right?
know about that.
Yeah.
I thought it would, you
Yeah.
said you simplified it to just foot
Yeah.
candles.
For the
Yeah.
facades,
For the facades,
right.
okay.
We were talking about facades then.
Okay, but not for the light spilling out into your yard.
Or the light spilling out anywhere,
Yeah.
actually.
Mm.
So if you have a non-compliant fixture, it's so this would be a question. So is any of that governed by like a state or federal law that if something is designated historic, that it's not to be messed with?
No.
No, okay. Okay, well, we may want to write an exception for historic
Yeah, because
designated
I
buildings.
hate to, who will be the appeals body for
Yeah.
this? Will it be the zoning board of appeals?
Yeah.
I would hate to have to send historic property owners to the ZBA to try to keep something that they've had for 100 years.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I can't think of any examples of historic lighting that really needs to be kept, but if this goes into effect the way it's written, we'll find it immediately.
Right, yeah.
All
can
they'll
cer-
come up.
Yeah.
I've made a note of
In a
that.
hurry.
We can certainly
Yeah.
include a language like that.
So is that, this basically eliminates any type of landscape lighting as well?
Landscape lighting is allowed for in one of the items here.
Yeah. So, it is allowed. If you are illuminating for landscapes, there's a curfew on it, so it needs to be turned off between midnight and dawn.
And it also needs to be maximally shielded. But this is the one exception to, allowing
About
light
light.
upward. Well, actually, it's not the one, because the facades also allow light upward, but lighting that's supposed to be illuminating the trees or your sculptures or whatever needs to be maximally shielded so that it basically only lights the sculpture or whatever the target is.
Does that include motion sensor?
Motion sensors are supposed to not be triggered by motion outside the property.
So if there's a tree limb on their property that's triggering their light fixture to go on and off all night and shining into my bedroom, that's okay.
That sounds non-compliant in a variety of
Yeah.
ways.
Not that I'm bitter about it.
It's okay, I've got something in my own backyard.
Somebody who built an 8-foot fence in their backyard to block out the light pollution.
This is just right, this is across the street from me, down their driveway and into my front yard, right into my front, it's unbelievable. They said it was for security. Under prohibitions, it says the following lighting systems are prohibited. Part 2, any dynamically changing lights, including strobe lights or lights that are programmed to be flashing, blinking, or moving. Does that mean the U of M scoreboard?
Unfortunately, the U of M is totally exempt. And that's a sign, isn't it?
It is. So this is only related to.
It's not a lighting system.
Yeah, though sort of next The next step would be to approach the university
Yeah, 'cause
with
I could see
with
that
their
from my
own,
bedroom, too.
But
So neon that's used not in a sign, but as an accent would not be allowed.
It would be
Unshielded
allowed if it was shielded.
neon.
Yeah.
But if it's just.
Even on
applied to
signs.
And we've seen it applied.
Either side of the west end.
I can't remember what the
Yeah.
sign ordinance says about it, but I
believe.
I can't remember.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Again, I can't think of any examples of solo neon that,
I-
but it would beg the question of, are we gonna go out every time we get a building permit and look at every building for violations of the lighting ordinance?
I think in practicality, nothing's going to shift, right? There's not additional funding for enforcement related to this. However, if there's something that's particularly offensive, there is now a mechanism for reining it back in.
Yeah.
So when you,
My friend is gonna be so excited when I show him this later. He's got
when
a
you,
really
when you
tough
create a
neighbor.
building permit, do you need to show your existing light, you're gonna do an addition? It seemed like you were gonna need to show all of your existing lights, I assume that's just outdoor light fixtures?
Yes, this applies only to outdoors.
Okay, so you're doing an addition on the rear, but, yeah, the building inspector's gonna make you put in all new smoke detectors, because that's what they do throughout the whole house. And then the other thing you're gonna have to do is document what your existing exterior light fixtures are, even if it's not part of the addition, as part of your building permit?
Right now, that's the way it's written.
Yeah, that's one of the pieces I think we're getting a little bit of clarification from planning on in terms of exactly at what stages this will be brought in.
Okay.
So as it's written right now, when a building permit is pulled, that's something that would be considered. It's currently not. So we have to figure out exactly.
You're working with the plan reviewers and all that on
Yeah,
that one?
that's
Okay.
sort of one piece in terms of what types of applications will actually trigger this.
And the other part I could see is under exterior lighting specifications, under, I guess this was Luminaire design and installation, part I, under canopy lighting. So we have a lot of canopy requests. I don't think many come up with lighting requests either, do they?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, I guess
They all have
occasionally they
lighting.
do.
They'll have a couple
Depends on the
of
canopy.
Yeah.
So that might fall under us a lot. Sometimes they do those, like those reach over lights a lot that stick over the canopy, or try and stick them between the canopies. And those would reflect right off the canopy sometimes. But
Yeah,
You mean the light over the canopy as opposed to under the canopy?
there's both I've seen, I guess. We've seen some under the canopy, but mostly there's ones that pop out of the walls. Those were a long time ago, though. I haven't seen them in a while.
Well, if they're shielded, they're allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've noticed when we were going around that there are, I can't remember the name of the building, the kind of new student high-rise that's on Washington, relatively new, some kind of facade lighting that's completely unshielded, that this sort of would hopefully capture. That seems to be a little bit of a trend. We saw it on the George as well. Hopefully, it would eliminate those sort of, that sort of lighting, because it's just
Michigan National
bleeding
Building?
everywhere.
People love that.
What's that?
The colorful lighting on the Michigan National Building?
Yeah. It just would need to be turned off
Yeah,
under
at
this.
midnight.
Though, I guess not, because it's existing lighting. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but they've got a building permit every few months for
Yeah.
something in the building.
Yeah,
Yep.
so they just have to turn off at midnight.
Yeah.
Yes. I guess the same for like the Ann Arbor Art, what's the place downtown, the Art Center, with their banners that stick out that are lit from underneath.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you guys know the HDC allowed building uplighting once, about 10 years ago, and haven't since because it was a disaster. So it's generally not something that's allowed, except at very low light levels anyway. So we're,
Though there was some lighting that was added on Main Street for the, next to the Raven.
that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's the one,
That
where it
was-
was like straight up.
We did go and look at that.
Yeah.
And-
Did it look like an alien spaceship was landing in the middle of the
It was
block?
honestly,
It wasn't that bad.
compared to what was
Okay.
happening in surrounding areas, it was actually sort of difficult. We realized we'd have to be on top to actually be able
Yeah.
to get good readings on it.
Good.
What about
one of the
Glacier
reasons-
Building, KeyBank.
Yeah,
has that plan.
yeah, they have a lot of but then that would just have to be turned off at midnight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Glazier building, it's the Key Bank building on the corner of Main Street and Huron.
Okay.
West Huron, kind of,
Yeah.
it's right on the corner.
Yeah, they have a lot of
Dolman Properties.
facade lighting.
Yeah.
It's really well done.
Thank you, Jill.
Is there any standard that the lighting manufacturers are applying
She
to
said
their
it was well done.
products
I
that
was just saying
say
thank you.
this is a fully, I guess fully shielded maybe, but it is like, this is a dark sky friendly fixture? Like, is there, what?
There is a designation.
What should we look for? What should we tell the homeowners and the business owners to buy a light fixture that has this?
Some manufacturers actually do that. They actually do have a label on it, and if you Google dark sky light fixture, you actually get a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, actually, it's already started coming across the Planning Commission. I know, I think it was Lockwood. They were very clear that their fixtures were dark skies compliant.
So dark skies, that's the code
Yep.
word for a good fixture.
Yep.
What's IDA?
This is.
IDA,
Yeah.
International Dark Skies.
Is that the logo? Okay.
Yeah, so the IDA does have a certification program. I think I don't know how much time they actually put into that, because they're a very, very tiny staff, and someone in Ipsy told me that they actually, on EMU campus purchased some of these, and they actually apparently were not very compliant. But yes,
We'll get
yeah,
there.
by all means,
All right.
let me send people to the program.
Dark sky.
Because the ones that I bought actually from Home Depot were marked dark sky compliant, and they weren't IDA certified. They were just dark sky, the manufacturer put on them.
I just claimed it, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's
Why not?
great, yeah.
All right, well, anything else? Anyone? Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you very much. We would love to get, any additional comments. Jill has my email, and my email's also on the presentation.
Yeah, some of us has thoughts as we go to sleep and go, wait a minute, I just thought,
That's
yeah.
right.
Right.
I've got a light meter if you want me to go measure something.
Ooh,
Okay.
my neighbor.
I'm overly excited about this right now.
Longshore Drive, condos.
Yes. Yeah, this
There's a
is great.
HPS light every 15 feet, and,
Yeah.
yeah, basically, I'm sleeping.
Oh, dear. Right. Are they streetlight type lights?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the worst one.
Yeah, we've
Sorry.
noticed some of the streetlights
Yeah.
are particularly bad
Goes
offenders.
Outside your front door at night, and it's just like,
But it could be worse.
yeah.
Could
Because
be.
the newer ones that come
That
in
are blue.
are so the LEDs are very directional, so if they are pointed your way, it's just like far, far worse than HPS.
I'm curious because I remember growing up and whenever we drive anywhere, there was bugs all over our windshield. And now there's no bugs on our windshield
Right.
at all,
Right.
anywhere I go. And you listed in here that insects are harmed by it, but I don't think we really understand the scope of
I don't think we do
impact on
either.
insects.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because my suspicion is exactly the same. So I grew up in upstate New York, and when I drive back and forth.
You get
across-
nailed, it's
Yeah,
like
there's
just coating
no
off.
bugs.
Yeah.
And
there's nothing.
interestingly enough, the population of bugs seems to have decreased in exactly the same time scale that lighting.
That lighting went up, yeah.
But
So there's a
people-
correlation.
There's a correlation.
be
People
good
are
to see if there's
attributing it to other
causation.
things,
Yeah.
but I think you're absolutely right. This problem has not been studied. It's not very well understood.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
These are the things that go on in my head. I also thought about waves on a lake. Like, there's waves all the time on lakes, especially July 4th. And the waves never go away. How does that affect the local ecology? Does it? Just think about it.
The waves never go away?
Yeah, the waves pretty much percolate all overnight, especially 4th of July weekend. The waves are there. Like, if you're on a small lake and there's lots of boats out,
Yeah, right.
even after midnight, the waves are still out there.
Right.
And they're bigger waves than normally what the lake is used
The
to.
waves from the boats. Okay.
Yeah, and there's really no calmness anymore on a lake, because there's boats out all the time. All right, G2, pedestrian scale sign. Scale sign guidelines.
Scales.
You have a packet, a memo.
Yeah. There's a little memo in your packet with a couple of recommendations. So, we've talked about these small-scale pedestrian signs over the years, starting in like 2006, but we've never actually put it into a guideline. So all this little staff memo does is proposes to add to the existing historic district sign guidelines,
Parts that are,
new bits about the pedestrian scale signs.
just the parts that are underlined.
Just the parts that are underlined, yep. They're intended to help pedestrians find a business from the sidewalk. They're usually not a business's primary signage. They should be located near the entry, 8 feet from the ground, mounted on an arm or arms or a bracket, aligned with similar signs on the block, and size not to exceed 4.5 square feet per side. This is roughly a 28-inch diameter circle or 25-inch square. Odd shapes are welcome. Reviewed on a case-by-case basis. So this came about because of the West End Grill application that came in. They wanted a much larger sign, and I said, well, that doesn't really meet our guidelines. This is what would meet our guidelines. And they came in and applied for that, which I give them a lot of credit for, but that's not what they wanted. And they really pressed hard on, well, you know, what are your guidelines? You know, how do I know that I can only make it that big?
Yeah.
And that's difficult in a
And we
historic
didn't have
district
it in
with
there.
anything. But we have pretty much made, you know, policy-setting decisions over the last 10 years about these little pedestrian scale signs. And if you feel like you need more backup on this, that's fine. I'm perfectly willing to do a write-up of here are the signs that have been approved, here's how many square feet they are. But this is comparable to everything that's been approved in the last few years, with the exception of one sign that was 4.8 square feet on a side. Most of them are smaller than 4.5 square feet on a side.
So the only thing added to our original guidelines is the pedestrian scale signs?
Yeah, just the
Everything
part
else
that's
we're-
underlined.
Everything's underlined.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other stuff is already out there on the website.
Do you need to say mounted on arms or arms hung from a bracket through the masonry joints or something like that?
Yes.
Add that language?
Yep.
And then located near the business entry, at least 8 feet from the ground on the first floor. Something about the bottom of the sign, no more than 8 feet below, something.
That's a code thing, so that's okay.
Okay.
I mean, you gotta be 8 feet
From the
with
bottom of the
anything.
sign.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that one I'm not worried about, because
Because it follows.
sign people seem to
yeah.
understand that there's a building code issue there too, yeah.
Joe, what do you mean by the third bullet there? It was a little vague to me. I wasn't sure what you meant. Like, aligned could mean several different things, so aligned in which way? And then also you say.
Forming a voting block. I mean,
Right? Like, aligned by
Aligned.
height?
Physically aligned? I mean,
I
what,
just wasn't
what,
sure what you meant aligned, or like, what would I do, like, for example, like, give me for example with aligned.
Yeah.
I've got a sign over here
Mm-hmm.
that's up at 10 feet, and then I've got a sign here that's different, and what do you mean aligned?
compatible with the mounting height of different sites?
by height, okay, so
different-
height,
Well,
you're talking
It's
about
supposed to be
height.
8 feet, even if there's a big grade change.
yeah, it's gonna be at least 8 feet at the bottom of the sign, but, it's supposed to not be,
All over the
yeah,
place.
staggered as you go down the block. It's supposed to
Okay.
be similar to
So
the
height, okay, so it's, the
Yeah.
height is aligned, I get
Yeah.
it. And then
Or
similar sign that's.
horizontally aligned with similar signs?
Well, but it's not necessarily horizontal if it's a sloping street.
Yeah, but it's like she doesn't want one way down at the street at like 11 feet and another one at 8 feet.
Right.
And then
Yeah,
they
yeah.
jog
Is
back
there
and forth. She wants them
another
all
way?
kind
Yeah.
Be like in a very specific sign band or in a zone.
Yeah, it's hard to be too specific though, because you'll
Right.
get the odd building that you can't make that happen with. And,
We're talking about the Grange and the.
I could
we
say
looked
what,
at today, they were all, there was a rhythm there.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking if there's a,
well, that's an easy block because all the buildings are the same.
right, no, I
Yeah.
just wanted to
Yeah.
read
The language.
the guide.
Yeah, it's here, it's,
Oh, right.
Are the pedestrian scale signs always perpendicular to the building?
no,
They're not,
not always.
okay.
So this application.
Seems good.
Placing signs to align with others along the commercial block face. That's what the existing design guideline says.
I think it's obvious. It's
That
height.
seems to work.
Align the height, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we can use that as a interpretative aspect. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's open enough for us to say, hey, this one's way over here, this one's way over here. Make it a line.
Yeah, keep it vague.
All right, so if you guys are okay with this, with these two small changes that John proposed, somebody could make the motion. Or we could get more into it at our retreat or something else.
All right, anyone make the motion?
Sure.
Commissioner Cope?
Is it right here?
That's
I
coming up
move
on the agenda.
Is it this right here? I move to
Yeah,
approve the
Commissioner
revised
Rockland.
Ann Arbor Historic District sign guidelines to include information on pedestrian scale signs and direct staff to post this information on the city website and include pedestrian scale signage in a future update of the Ann Arbor Historic District design guidelines.
Second.
Tie support by, I'm gonna give it to Commissioner Eben Hall.
We didn't talk
All
about
in
the
favor, or are you gonna have discussion?
junction box and
Oh,
yeah, we didn't
conduit.
Talking
and-
about that.
Yeah, so I think we should just tell people when they're submitting for a lighted sign that they have to also give us detail
On the conduit.
on the
Electrical
conduit.
connection and
Electrical
other
connection and
Yeah.
conduit, yeah.
components.
And you know what?
Yeah,
I can put that
appurtenances.
right, I can put that right in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Chow.
Chow.
Yeah.
Oh, it's that.
Chow didn't,
Do we have to revote?
The sign is up.
David pointed it out to me, it's just completely.
I haven't seen it yet.
The sign is cool.
I think it would be
No,
in
the electrical.
the
box
not
is
appropriate
front
or
and center.
appropriate category,
Oh,
right?
that's what's in the,
The
it's
junction box, right?
Not appropriate.
They should, yeah.
Well, I'd rather say you've got to show us what it is.
Yeah, it's gotta be a bullet then under,
The sign is awesome. The sign's great.
Under acceptable sign lighting, up here.
yeah.
Why would you want that?
New wiring must go through masonry joints, not the masonry units. It already says that.
It does, and maybe say, and provide details of the junction box,
Yeah.
location and,
Nice.
location and,
Junction box,
uh,
location and appearance.
and appearance, well, and also mounting of the junction.
And method of mounting.
Who made the motion?
Must be
Approve the amendment.
indicated.
Like, we need to reread it.
Junction
No,
box
we-
location and appearance and method of mounting must be indicated on the application.
We're adding a bullet to acceptable sign lighting about the junction boxes and,
Application.
Electrical connection being approved or.
yeah.
I'm gonna actually say
Reviewed and-
conduit and junction box. Junction, okay.
Seconded and approved? Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Say all in favor?
All those in favor? Say yes?
Yes.
Yes. All those opposed, say no. Motion carries.
All right. On to the annual retreat.
Retreat planning.
Is that on the agenda?
It is.
It's G3.
G3.
Oh, I totally missed it.
I'm impressed that you read the agenda. All right. We did not have one last year, and we need to have one this year because we didn't have one last year. It kind of fell apart with not enough
did.
people could attend, and we just gave
Do you
up
need to
on
do
it.
another survey of sorts?
Well,
Or do you want to do one now?
I'm going to ask you right now, and if you
Okay, what are the
don't have
dates?
your phone with you. We're looking at Saturday, April 6, or Saturday, April 13. It's generally from 9 a.m. to noon. If you guys would prefer, we could do an evening.
Nope.
Prefer an
The
afternoon.
20th is out because it's Easter weekend, and I'll probably be out of town. So the three Saturdays in April are the 6th, the 13th, and the 27th.
Can't do the 27th.
I am out every single one of those weekends.
Okay? The whole weekend?
Bike race season, it starts in April.
Oh, come on, you can
ride every
miss
Sunday.
one bike
I don't
race
race
for the
Sundays.
annual retreat.
So the trouble with getting into May is that no one ever wants to go to a retreat on a Saturday morning in May.
No, because it's beautiful.
Because it's beautiful
Plus I
outside.
have.
And you have
races
bike
all
races.
May too. The Water Hill Music Festival is canceled.
Yeah.
We'll do it Monday, the 5th in the afternoon.
That frees up a Sunday.
I'm good the 6th or the 13th, Joe.
Okay. Can anyone else not make the 6th and the 13th? 6th
Of
or
April?
13th? Yeah,
Oh, wait, the 13th is no good.
okay, in the morning, 9 to 12, okay. We're 2 down on the 6th. How about the 13th?
The 13th I cannot.
Well, I know you can't, but anybody else?
I can do 13.
If I had to, I could do the 6th.
13th,
you
April
have to.
13th, going once?
What was the other issue with the 6th?
The 6th is better than the 13th for me.
Same with me.
Same with me.
Yeah, but Max can't make
I'll
it.
do it. I'll figure it out.
Oh, good.
I'll figure it out.
All right.
I'll send my.
Anna's being quiet.
I'm good.
No conflicts, you're wide open.
April 6th,
Want to do a
All right,
bike race?
April 6th it is.
10 a.m.
Just set an appointment on
10 a.m.
April 6th.
I was like, yeah, the 6th. I can move it though.
Oh,
it's fine.
jeez. Thank you. All right, I'm going to mock up a retreat agenda and send it out to you guys, and you can add things to it or not. If you've got a guest speaker that you'd really like to hear from, 9 a.m. to noon.
We're doing the 6th,
Yep, we're doing it April 6th, 9 a.m. to noon.
Burns Park, is that where it is, or?
You want it there?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, we can do it there. Yeah, just need a city building.
I don't know, I just,
All right,
That was nice.
Burns Park, Senior Center. Okay,
the old horse barn.
Oh, you
Yeah.
talked about that.
Right.
yeah.
9 to noon.
And I jotted down some topics to talk about. I don't have it here in front of me, but, so I'll send you guys a list of topics. We'll always do the review of the bylaws that we have to do, and we'll always do the annual review of projects.
This is starting at 10 a.m., is that?
9 a.m. to noon, 9 a.m. to noon. We could just shorten it down and do it on our lunch hour,
That would
kind of
be,
Tuesday.
Good.
I could do that.
I could do
We could do,
Make
we could do a
that-
series of lunch hours.
I could do,
that. I'm up for that.
Yeah,
we
let's
have
not do that.
we have 2 yeses. You
One
say
and-
no?
One
for
and done,
lunches?
one and done. All right, we're good. Keep going, John.
Okay. Next is H, approval of minutes. We have the January 10th minutes in front of us to look over. That was our last meeting, I think.
I don't think Commissioner Rockland voted on
Oh,
the
Oh, on
house.
503 West Jefferson? No, I
Yeah.
definitely didn't.
okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Does it say?
All right, I will put you down as,
I was
He
recused.
needed to recuse himself. It's a little confusing, isn't it?
That was December, wasn't it?
January.
he had 2 applications in a row.
Oh.
December and January, yeah.
Okay, that's page 4.
All right, so we have some amendments to the
Like
minutes.
a half hour late. We did rescue that Commissioner Lisa.
Okay,
Any other amendments, changes, deletions? All right. All those in favor of the approval of minutes as presented and modified, now modified, please say yes.
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 All those opposed, please say no. I meant to say yes. All right, the minutes have been approved. Moving on to I, reports from commissioners, and any reports from commissioners to present?
Just a quick, where are my notes?
Cobblestone?
From Cobblestone. December.
They're very happy to have you. They're very happy she's going to the Cobblestone meetings.
Are they
George is very relieved, yes.
Oh, all right. They, let's see. They've been working with a U of M capstone group to kind of envision, I think it's the west, is it the west porch? It's like the shed area. It's open to whoever, it's not an enclosed area, but they've been working with the student
Towards the
group.
barnyard,
Yes.
to the west.
Is that the west?
I would think that's the west, Max, but.
I'm so turned around now. But they have the students are presenting their recommendations for that next month.
Cool.
Let's see, they're trying to figure out their social media situation and planning. The Spring Fling event is May 5th. And,
Waterhill Music Festival, so people are available.
what was that?
There's no Waterhill
Oh,
Music
right,
Festival,
that's the
so people
day.
are available.
All right, well, I'll let them know. Yeah, that's Cobblestone Farm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, on to J, assignments. Review committee is Monday, April 8th at 5 PM. Look at your calendars again. Anyone available?
Oh, we switched to 5. It's 5, it's not noon.
It's at
Five
5,
PM.
according to this.
Mondays, I cannot accommodate the 5 o'clock time.
I should be able to make that.
I should be able to make it too.
Okay, Evan and John, thank you.
I'm
The
putting it on
summer
my
crew
calendar.
taking over.
Yeah,
I got us through winter.
you did a lot this winter, Max, thank you for that.
Thank you, Max. Max really stepped up.
Almost everyone.
All right, reports from staff. We have January and February in front.
Yeah, ask me if you have any questions. There's just a whole lot of
Yeah, it's
vinyl
not-
windows and exhaust fans. There's
The church
one
replacing a lot of windows.
vinyl window.
But they wanted, they've already.
Was that an application?
No, I just was reading that. What is this, replace 2 storefront windows, 2 doors and?
So HCC 19026, which is the last one on the list, is 613 East Liberty. It's American Apparel.
Oh.
And they wanted to go back to 3 storefronts instead of 1. And so they wanted to add 2 entry doors. And I sent it out to the 3 officers and said, can I staff approve
We gave
this?
staff.
And they said,
Gotcha.
thumbs up. So I did. It was really just taking a sheet of glass and adding a door on one side of the sheet of glass.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Approval, do we have to, there's no approval on that.
No.
All right, any concerns from commissioners? Elle?
Commissioner Rockland already brought up that good concern there about the conduit.
Electrical.
Yeah, folded into.
Yeah, it got folded in, all right.
All right, and then we have communications, any various communications to the HCC?
None.
All right, there being no further business, and without objection, I adjourn the March 14th, 2019 Ann Arbor Historic District Commission meeting.